Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories, here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Emily Hall, and I am 32 years old. This happened in the summer of 2022 near the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest in northern Wisconsin. The isolation had been the selling point. Not a soul for miles, the Airbnb listing had promised. A week-long getaway with my best friends, Tara and Danielle, was exactly what I needed after the hellish year I'd had. The divorce papers were finally signed, the custody arrangement settled, every other weekend with my daughter, Lily. A knot formed in my throat at the thought of her. 2 whole weeks apart, the longest we'd ever been separated. Earth to Emily. Tara waved her hand in front of my face as we pulled off Highway 70 onto a narrow dirt road. You've been staring out the window for the last hour. Sorry, I mumbled, forcing a smile. Just thinking. Well, stop it, Danielle said from the driver's seat, her eyes flicking to mine in the rearview mirror. That's the whole point of this trip. No thinking allowed. The 3 of us had been friends since college, 15 years of shared history. They'd seen me through everything. Marriage to David, Lily's birth, and now the divorce. This trip was their attempt to help me heal, to remind me that I was still Emily Hall, not just David's ex-wife or Lily's part-time mom. The SUV jostled as we hit a particularly deep pothole. Danielle swore under her breath. The listing wasn't kidding about the road being rough. How much further? Tara asked, squinting at her phone. No signal, by the way. We're officially off-grid. The directions say about 2 more miles down this road, Danielle replied, slowing down as we approached a fallen branch. Then we should see the cabin on the right. I gazed out at the dense pine forest surrounding us. The trees grew so close together that they blocked out much of the afternoon sunlight, casting long shadows across the road. It was beautiful in a primal sort of way, untouched and wild. Yet something about the density of those woods made my skin prickle. There it is! Tara pointed excitedly as the cabin came into view. It was larger than I'd expected. A 2-story log structure with a wide front porch and large windows that reflected the forest like dark mirrors. A stone chimney climbed up one side, promising cozy evenings by the fire. It should have been welcoming, but something about its solitary presence in the clearing made my stomach clench. It's perfect, Danielle declared, pulling into the graveled area beside the cabin and cutting the engine. Home sweet home for the next week, Tara agreed, already opening her door. The air that rushed in was crisp and pine-scented, carrying a damp earthiness that filled my lungs. It was quiet in a way I wasn't used to. No distant traffic, no neighbors, no hum of civilization. Just the soft rustle of wind through the trees and the occasional call of a bird. "Come on, Em," Tara urged, already pulling bags from the trunk. "Help us unload." I nodded, shaking off my unease. This was supposed to be fun, a chance to reconnect with my friends and myself. I couldn't let my anxiety ruin it before it even began. The cabin key was hidden under a fake rock by the porch steps, just as the owner had promised. Inside, the cabin was all knotty pine and rustic charm. A large, open living area with a stone fireplace, a fully equipped kitchen, and doors leading to bedrooms on either side. A staircase led to what I assumed were more bedrooms on the 2nd floor. "Dibs on a room with a view," Tara called, already bounding up the stairs. Danielle rolled her eyes at me, grinning. Some things never change. "I'll take whichever room is left," I said, setting my bag down by the couch. "I don't care." "No way," Danielle insisted, her expression softening. "You get first pick after Tornado Tara. Doctor's orders." Danielle was a pediatrician, and she'd been using the doctor's orders line on us for years. It always made me smile. "Fine," I conceded. "I'll take that one." I pointed to a door on the main floor, not wanting to climb stairs every time I needed something. The bedroom was small but comfortable. A queen-sized bed covered with a patchwork quilt, a pine dresser, and a window overlooking the back of the property. Through the glass, I could see a fire pit surrounded by log benches and, beyond that, a narrow trail leading into the woods. I unpacked slowly, arranging my clothes in the dresser drawers, placing my toiletries on the small shelf in the adjoining bathroom. The routine was calming, giving my hands something to do while my mind continued to race. I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror, dark circles under my eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, the strain of the past year etched into lines I didn't remember having before. "We brought wine," Tara's voice echoed through the cabin. "Lots and lots of wine." By the time I rejoined them, Tara and Danielle had claimed the kitchen, unpacking groceries and the promised bottles of wine. Tara was already pouring generous glasses of red. "To new beginnings," she toasted, handing me a glass. "To friendship," Danielle added. "To a week without cell service," I said, managing a genuine smile this time. The wine was rich and smooth, warming me from the inside out. We prepared dinner together, a simple pasta dish, and took our plates to the porch as the sun began to set. The forest transformed in the fading light, the green deepening to near black, the spaces between trees filling with shadow. "So," Tara said, setting down her empty plate, "what's the plan for tomorrow? Hiking? Swimming? There's supposed to be a lake within walking distance." "I vote hiking," Danielle replied. "I downloaded some trail maps before we lost service. There's a loop trail that takes you up to Tim's Hill, highest point in Wisconsin. The views are supposed to be amazing." "Emily," Tara prompted when I didn't respond. "Hiking sounds good," I agreed, though the thought of venturing deeper into those woods sent a shiver down my spine. I blamed it on the cooling evening air. As darkness fell completely, we moved inside. Danielle built a fire in the stone fireplace while Tara rummaged through her bag, producing a deck of cards and another bottle of wine. "Who's up for some poker?" she asked, waggling her eyebrows. We played late into the night, the wine loosening our tongues, conversation flowing easily from college memories to current lives. Tara's latest disastrous date, Danielle's struggles at the hospital, my awkward co-parenting arrangements with David. For a few hours, the weight I'd been carrying seemed lighter. It was after midnight when we finally called it a night, the fire burning low in the grate. I stumbled to my room, pleasantly tipsy, and fell into bed without bothering to wash my face. Sleep came quickly, but it wasn't peaceful. I dreamed of running through the forest, branches tearing at my clothes, something dark and formless pursuing me. In the dream, I could hear Lily calling for me, her voice small and frightened, but no matter which direction I turned, I couldn't find her. The sound of scratching woke me, a persistent, deliberate noise against the outside wall near my window. I lay frozen, suddenly stone-cold sober, straining to hear in the darkness. Scratch, 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 like nails on wood. My heart hammered in my chest. "It's just a branch," I told myself. Or an animal, a raccoon, maybe. But it didn't sound like a branch blown by wind. It sounded intentional. I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand, wincing as the screen lit up, casting blue light across the room. 3:17 a.m., and, as expected, no service. The scratching stopped abruptly. I held my breath, listening. The cabin was silent except for the occasional creak of settling wood. After several minutes of nothing, I convinced myself I'd imagined it, a remnant of my nightmare or a product of too much wine and an unfamiliar place. I was almost asleep again when I heard it, a whisper so faint I might have missed it if I hadn't been lying perfectly still. "Emily." My eyes flew open, pulse skyrocketing. It came from outside, near the window. My name, spoken softly but clearly. I sat up, clutching the quilt to my chest. "Who's there?" I whispered, though I knew no one could hear me through the closed window. Silence answered me. With trembling fingers, I reached for the bedside lamp, fumbling with the switch. Warm light flooded the room, pushing back the shadows. I stared at the window, half expecting to see a face pressed against the glass, but there was only darkness beyond the pane. It took every ounce of courage I possessed to slide out of bed and approach the window. The wooden floor was cold beneath my bare feet. I stood to the side of the window, then quickly pulled back the curtain. Nothing. Just the dark outline of trees against a star-filled sky. I sagged with relief, pressing a hand to my pounding heart. My imagination was working overtime. The stress of the divorce, the separation from Lily, it was all taking a toll on my mental health. A floorboard creaked in the hallway outside my room. "Tara?" I called softly. "Danielle?" No response. Gathering my courage, I crossed to the door and pulled it open. The living room was dark except for the faint glow of embers in the fireplace. No sign of my friends. "Hello?" I whispered. Something moved in the shadows by the front door, a darker shape within the darkness. I froze, blood turning to ice in my veins. Then a sleepy voice called from upstairs. "Em, everything okay?" Danielle, sounding groggy and confused. The shape by the door vanished as if it had never been there. "Fine," I called back, my voice unnaturally high. "Just getting some water." I hurried to the kitchen, flipping on lights as I went. The tap sputtered before releasing a stream of clear water. I filled a glass with shaking hands and drank deeply, trying to calm myself. "You're being ridiculous," I scolded myself. "This is exactly why Tara and Danielle worried about you coming on this trip." After the divorce was finalized, I'd had a few panic attacks, episodes where ordinary shadows seemed menacing, where everyday noises became sinister. My therapist called it an acute stress response. My friends called it concerning. I took another deep breath and switched off the kitchen light, determined to return to bed without further drama. But as I turned, something on the front porch caught my eye. A strange pattern of light and shadow cast through the window. Moving closer, I peered through the glass. The porch was empty, but on the steps, my blood froze. Footprints. Wet footprints leading up to the door. Too small to belong to any of us. Child-sized. I blinked, and they were gone. Morning arrived with golden light and birdsong. The night's terrors seeming distant and absurd. I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Tara and Danielle chatting in the kitchen. "She lives," Tara announced when I emerged from my room, still in my pajamas. "Barely," I mumbled, making a beeline for the coffee pot. "I didn't sleep well." "New place," Danielle nodded knowingly. "First night's always the hardest." I didn't mention the scratching, the whispers, or the footprints. In the bright light of day, I couldn't be sure any of it had actually happened. "So, we're still on for hiking?" Tara asked, spreading jam on a piece of toast. Danielle found a trail that leads to something called Devil's Lake. I nearly choked on my coffee. "Devil's Lake?" "It's just a name," Danielle said, showing me a printed map. "It's actually a beautiful spot. The trail follows Morgan Creek up through the northern part of Price County and supposedly has some amazing views." The name sent a chill through me despite the warm coffee in my hands, but I nodded, unwilling to let my irrational fears ruin our plans. "Sounds great," I lied. We set out an hour later, day packs filled with water, snacks, and first aid supplies. Danielle, ever the prepared one, had also packed a satellite emergency beacon. "Just in case," she explained when Tara rolled her eyes. The trailhead was a 15-minute drive from our cabin, a small clearing with a weathered wooden sign marking the start of the Morgan Creek Trail. The morning was perfect for hiking. Cool, but not cold. The sky a clear, endless blue above the tree canopy. "According to the map, it's about a 4-mile hike to the lake," Danielle said, studying the trail guide. "Moderate difficulty. Should take us maybe 2 hours each way with stops." "Lead on, trail boss," Tara said with a mock salute. The first mile was pleasant, the trail wide and well-maintained. We walked 3 abreast, talking and laughing, the forest bright and welcoming around us. But as we continued, the trail narrowed, forcing us to walk single file with Danielle in front, me in the middle, and Tara bringing up the rear. The trees grew denser, older, their massive trunks covered in thick moss. Less sunlight penetrated here, and the air felt different, heavy, almost oppressive. The cheerful birdsong that had accompanied the start of our hike faded, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by our footsteps and the occasional distant call of a crow. "Is it just me, or did someone turn down the thermostat?" Tara joked, zipping up her light jacket. She was right. It was noticeably cooler here, even though we'd been climbing steadily uphill, which should have made us warmer. "It's the tree cover," Danielle explained. "Less sunlight gets through." That made logical sense, but it didn't explain the growing sense of unease I felt, a nagging feeling that we were being watched. I found myself constantly glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see something. But there was only Tara, her expression showing growing concern as she caught my repeated backward glances. "You okay?" she asked quietly, falling into step beside me when the trail briefly widened again. "Fine," I said automatically, just taking in the scenery. She didn't look convinced, but didn't press the issue. The trail began to follow alongside Morgan Creek, the sound of running water a welcome break in the forest's silence. The creek was narrow but swift, water tumbling over rocks worn smooth by centuries of flow. "We should be getting close to the lake," Danielle called back to us, checking her map again. "Maybe another half-mile." That's when I saw it, a flash of color where there should have been none. Something red, darting between trees on the other side of the creek. It was there and gone so quickly I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Almost. "Did you see that?" I asked, grabbing Tara's arm. "See what?" "Over there," I pointed across the creek. "Something red." Tara squinted in the direction I indicated. "Probably a cardinal or something." No, it was bigger, person-sized. Danielle had stopped walking and turned back to us. "What's up?" "Em thinks she saw something across the creek," Tara explained, her tone carefully neutral. "Like what?" Danielle asked, coming back to join us. "I don't know," I admitted. "Just something moving, something red." Danielle scanned the woods across the water. "I don't see anything now, but these forests do have black bears. They usually avoid people, but we should make some noise just in case." "It wasn't a bear," I insisted. "It was too quick, too upright." A look passed between Tara and Danielle, the kind of look they used to share when I was being difficult during the divorce proceedings. "Let's keep going," I said, suddenly embarrassed. "I'm probably just jumpy from lack of sleep." We continued on, but now Danielle began occasionally calling out, "Hey, bear!" in a loud voice, and Tara started telling a story about her co-worker's disastrous date at an unnecessarily high volume. They were humoring me, and it was both comforting and humiliating. The trail curved away from the creek, climbing more steeply through a section of forest where the trees seemed older, their massive trunks gnarled and twisted into strange shapes. Thick ferns carpeted the ground, their fronds brushing against our legs as we passed. A branch snapped loudly somewhere to our left. All three of us stopped, heads turning toward the sound. "Hey, bear!" Danielle called, her voice echoing among the trees. No response, not even another branch breaking. "Let's keep moving," she suggested, her voice dropping to a near whisper despite her earlier attempts at making noise. The trail grew steeper, roots crisscrossing the path like natural stairs. My calves burned with the effort, and I found myself focusing on my feet, careful not to trip. That's why I nearly collided with Danielle when she stopped abruptly. "What the hell?" she murmured. I looked up and felt my heart skip a beat. In the middle of the trail, maybe 20 feet ahead of us, stood a small red shoe. A child's sneaker, bright against the dark earth of the path. "That's odd," Tara said, coming up beside us. We approached it cautiously, as if the shoe might somehow be dangerous. It was a girl's sneaker, size 8 or 9 kids if I had to guess, about Lily's size. The thought sent a surge of panic through me. Danielle reached down and picked it up, turning it over in her hands. "It looks new," she observed. "Not like it's been out here long." "Maybe someone's nearby," Tara suggested, looking around. "Hello?" she called. "Anyone lose a shoe?" Her voice echoed and faded. No response. "We should take it with us," I said, the words coming out before I'd fully formed the thought. "In case we find who it belongs to." Danielle nodded, tucking the small shoe into her backpack. "Good idea." We continued on, but the mood had shifted. Even Tara and Danielle seemed uneasy now, our earlier camaraderie replaced by tense silence. I kept looking for the matching shoe or any other sign of a child on the trail, but there was nothing. Just endless trees and the increasingly rocky path. When we finally emerged from the woods onto the shores of Devil's Lake, the sight should have been breathtaking. The lake was a perfect oval, its surface a mirror reflecting the surrounding forest and sky. But instead of beauty, I saw only isolation. We were miles from anywhere, from anyone who might help if what? I asked myself. What exactly are you afraid of? I didn't have an answer, only the persistent feeling that something was wrong. Something was watching us. Waiting. "Let's have lunch," Danielle suggested, her voice forcibly bright as she shrugged off her pack. "I'm starving." We found a relatively flat boulder by the water's edge and spread out our food. Sandwiches, apples, trail mix. I wasn't hungry, but I nibbled at my food anyway, eyes constantly scanning the tree line. "This place is gorgeous," Tara said, trying to recapture our earlier mood. "Totally worth the hike." "Absolutely," Danielle agreed. When I didn't respond, she nudged me gently. "Earth to Emily. What's going on in that head of yours?" I sighed, setting down my half-eaten sandwich. "I don't know. I just have a bad feeling." "About what?" "This place. That shoe. All of it." I gestured vaguely around us. "Don't you think it's weird that we haven't seen anyone else on the trail? The parking area had other cars." "People take different trails," Danielle reasoned, "and it's a weekday, not exactly peak hiking season." "What about the shoe?" I pressed. Tara shrugged. "Kids lose things. Some family ahead of us probably didn't notice until they were too far along to go back." Their explanations were rational, logical, but they didn't ease the cold knot of dread in my stomach. "I think we should head back," I said finally. "I'm not feeling great." Concern immediately replaced the slight exasperation on their faces. "Of course," Danielle said, already packing up the remains of her lunch. "We can come back another day if you want." "Or not," Tara added, squeezing my hand. "No pressure." Their easy acceptance of my request only made me feel worse. They were being so careful with me, so gentle, as if I might break at any moment. And maybe they were right. We were gathering our things when I noticed something in the water, a dark shape beneath the surface near the shore. At first, I thought it was a log or a rock, but then it moved, a slow, deliberate shift that sent ripples across the lake's previously mirror-like surface. "There's something in the water," I said, pointing. Tara and Danielle both looked where I indicated. "I don't see anything," Tara said after a moment. The shape was gone, the surface of the lake once again undisturbed. "It was right there," I insisted. "Something big." "Could have been a fish," Danielle suggested. "Or a turtle." But it had been much larger than any fish or turtle native to Wisconsin lakes. I knew it, even if I couldn't prove it. We started back down the trail, our earlier formation reversed. Tara in front, me in the middle, Danielle bringing up the rear. The forest seemed different on the return journey, the trees closer together, the shadows deeper. Or maybe it was just my perception, colored by growing fear. We'd been walking for about 20 minutes when Tara stopped suddenly, head cocked to one side. "Do you hear that?" she asked. We all stood still, listening. At first, I heard nothing beyond the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Then it came, a child's laughter, distant but unmistakable. "Hello," Danielle called, her voice echoing among the trees. "Is someone there?" The laughter came again, closer this time, followed by what sounded like running footsteps. "There's a kid out here," Tara said, already moving in the direction of the sound. "Hello? Are you lost?" "Tara, wait," I called, an inexplicable panic rising in my chest. "Don't." But she was already pushing through the undergrowth beside the trail, following the sound. Danielle hesitated, looking from me to the spot where Tara had disappeared. "We should stay together," she said finally, grabbing my hand. "Come on." I wanted to refuse, to insist we stay on the trail, but I couldn't let my friends go alone. Reluctantly, I followed Danielle into the forest. The undergrowth was thick, branches catching on our clothes, roots threatening to trip us with every step. I lost sight of Tara almost immediately, but I could hear her up ahead, still calling out. "Hello? Where are you?" We pushed through a particularly dense thicket and stumbled into a small clearing. Tara stood in the center, turning in a slow circle, her expression confused. "I don't understand," she said as we approached. "The sound was coming from right here." The clearing was empty, except for us. No child, no signs that anyone had been there, just a perfect circle of open ground surrounded by towering pines. "We need to get back to the trail," I urged, tugging at Danielle's sleeve. "Now." Something about the clearing felt wrong, the way the trees grew around it in an almost too perfect circle, the unnatural stillness of the air, the complete absence of underbrush where everywhere else it grew in abundance. "Okay," Tara agreed, looking unsettled for the first time. "This is weird, I admit it." We turned to retrace our steps, but the thicket we'd pushed through seemed to have grown denser, the way back unclear. "It was this way," Danielle said, pointing. "Right." None of us were certain. The forest looked the same in every direction, an impenetrable wall of green. "Let me check the map," Danielle said, reaching for her pack. She froze, her hand halfway to the zipper. "What?" I asked, ice forming in my veins at her expression. "The shoe," she said, her voice a whisper. "It's gone." "What do you mean, gone?" Tara demanded. "It was in your pack." "I know, but it's not there now. I can feel that the side pocket is empty." A soft giggle echoed through the clearing, the same childlike laughter we'd followed, but now it seemed to come from all around us. "We need to go," I said, my voice tight with fear. "Now." Without waiting for agreement, I picked a direction and started walking, pushing through the undergrowth with desperate energy. Behind me, I could hear Tara and Danielle following, branches snapping as they hurried to keep up. I had no idea if we were heading toward the trail or deeper into the forest. I only knew we needed to get away from that clearing, from that laughter. After what felt like an eternity of struggling through dense vegetation, we suddenly broke through onto the trail, the actual hiking path, its packed earth and clear boundaries never looking so welcome. "Thank God," Tara gasped, bracing her hands on her knees as she caught her breath. Danielle just nodded, too winded to speak. I looked up and down the trail, trying to determine which way led back to the parking area. Nothing looked familiar. "Which way?" I asked. Danielle pulled out her map, studying it with a frown. "I think that way," she said finally, pointing to our right. "Downhill should lead back to the trailhead." We set off at a rapid pace, none of us wanting to spend any more time in these woods than necessary. The trail seemed steeper than I remembered, rockier, less maintained. But Danielle was right. Downhill would eventually lead us back to civilization. We'd been walking for about 10 minutes when Tara spotted it. The second shoe, placed neatly in the middle of the trail just like the first one had been. "Don't touch it," I said immediately as Danielle reached for it. She pulled her hand back, looking at me with a mixture of confusion and fear. "Em, what's going on?" I shook my head, unable to articulate the dread that was building inside me. "I don't know, but something's not right." "It's just a lost shoe," Tara insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. 2 lost shoes, I countered, placed directly in our path, miles apart. What are the odds? We stared at the small red sneaker, identical to the one that had disappeared from Danielle's pack. Let's keep moving, Danielle said finally. The sooner we get back to the car, the better. We skirted around the shoe, leaving it where it lay, and continued down the trail. The forest grew darker as clouds moved in, obscuring the sun. The air became colder, damper, carrying a musty smell like wet decay. How much further? Tara asked, wrapping her arms around herself. Danielle consulted the map again, her brow furrowed. We should be getting close, maybe another half-mile. But after another 20 minutes of walking, there was still no sign of the trailhead or parking area. The forest around us looked unfamiliar, the trees older, more twisted, the undergrowth darker and more tangled. I think we might have taken a wrong turn, Danielle admitted finally, stopping to study the map more carefully. How? Tara demanded. We've been following the same trail the whole time. I don't know, but this doesn't match up with what we should be seeing. A twig snapped loudly in the forest to our left. We all turned toward the sound, bodies tensing. Something moved between the trees, a flash of pale color against the green and brown of the forest. Too quick to identify, but distinctly human-shaped. Hello? Danielle called, her voice shaking slightly. Is someone there? No response, but I could feel eyes on us, watching, waiting. We need to keep moving, I urged, taking the map from Danielle's hands. Let me see. The map showed the Morgan Creek Trail as a simple loop, with the parking area clearly marked. According to the map, we should have reached the trailhead by now. Maybe we're here, I suggested, pointing to a different section of trail that branched off from the main loop. No, Danielle said, shaking her head. We didn't take any side trails. We must have, Tara insisted. Otherwise, we'd be back at the car by now. Another movement caught my eye, this time to our right, deeper in the woods, the same pale shape moving parallel to the trail. There's someone out there, I whispered, pointing. Tara and Danielle both looked, but the shape had vanished again. I don't see, Tara began. A scream cut through the forest, high-pitched, terrified, and unmistakably a child's. It came from somewhere ahead of us on the trail. Oh my God, Danielle gasped. Someone's in trouble. Before I could stop her, she was running toward the sound, Tara close behind. I had no choice but to follow, even as every instinct screamed at me to go in the opposite direction. The trail curved sharply, then opened onto another clearing, this one much larger than the first, with a massive oak tree at its center. The tree was ancient, its trunk wider than all 3 of us could have encircled with our arms, its branches spreading like a canopy over the entire space. But it wasn't the tree that stopped us in our tracks. It was what hung from its branches, dozens of pairs of shoes, dangling from the limbs by their laces. Children's shoes, in all sizes and colors, swaying gently in the breeze. What the hell? Tara whispered. In the center of the clearing, directly beneath the tree, stood a small figure in a red coat. A child, her back to us, her dark hair hanging loose around her shoulders. Hello? Danielle called, her doctor's instincts apparently overriding her fear. Are you okay? Are you lost? The child didn't respond, didn't turn. I grabbed Danielle's arm as she started forward. Don't, I hissed. She might need help, Danielle argued, trying to pull away. That's not a child, I insisted, though I couldn't have explained how I knew. The figure in the red coat slowly turned toward us. From a distance, she looked like an ordinary little girl, perhaps 8 or 9 years old. But as she began walking toward us, something about her movement seemed wrong. Too fluid, too smooth, as if her feet weren't quite touching the ground. Tara sucked in a sharp breath. Guys, I think we should go. Hello, the girl called, her voice high and sweet. Have you come to play with me? She was close enough now that I could see her face, pale, heart-shaped, with large dark eyes that seemed to swallow the light. She looked normal. Except for those eyes. "Are you lost?" Danielle asked, her voice gentler now. "What's your name?" The girl smiled, revealing teeth that were too small, too numerous. "My name is Lily." My heart stopped. "No, it's not," I said, the words forced through numb lips. The thing wearing a child's shape tilted its head, that terrible smile widening. "It is now." It happened so fast I barely had time to react. The creature, because it wasn't a child, wasn't human at all, lunged at Danielle with inhuman speed. I yanked her backward just as it swiped at her, its hands suddenly elongated, fingers tapering to sharp points. "Run!" I screamed, pulling Danielle with me as I turned and fled. We crashed back onto the trail, running blindly, no direction in mind except away. I could hear Tara just behind us, her breathing ragged with terror. The forest blurred around us as we ran, branches whipping our faces, roots threatening to trip us. I had no idea if we were heading toward the trailhead or deeper into the woods. It didn't matter. All that mattered was putting distance between us and that clearing, that tree, that thing with Lily's name. A root caught my foot and I went down hard, pain shooting through my ankle. Danielle skidded to a stop beside me. "Em, are you okay?" "Keep going," I gasped, trying to push myself up. "Don't stop." "We're not leaving you," Tara insisted, appearing at my other side. Together, they hauled me to my feet. I tested my weight on the injured ankle, painful, but I could walk, or at least limp. "Is it following us?" Tara gasped, looking back the way we'd come. The trail behind us was empty, but the forest had gone unnaturally silent. No birds, no rustle of leaves, just our own ragged breathing. I began. A child's laughter echoed through the trees, seeming to come from all directions at once. "Move," Danielle urged, supporting me as we began to jog awkwardly down the trail. "We need to find the car." My ankle throbbed with each step, but fear was a powerful anesthetic. We moved as quickly as my injury would allow. Danielle on one side, Tara on the other, half carrying me between them. The trail curved and dipped, taking us through sections of forest that grew increasingly unfamiliar. The trees here were different. Older, their bark blackened as if by fire, their branches twisted into grotesque shapes that seemed to reach for us as we passed. "This isn't right," Tara panted. "We should have reached the parking area by now." Danielle stopped abruptly, forcing us all to halt. "Listen." Through the trees ahead, I could hear the faint sound of running water. "The creek," I realized. "We're back at Morgan Creek." "That's impossible," Tara insisted. "We've been going downhill the entire time." But as we rounded the next bend in the trail, there it was, Morgan Creek, its waters rushing over rocks just as we'd seen earlier. But now the water looked different. Darker, almost black in the fading light. "The sun's going down," Danielle observed, a new note of panic in her voice. "We need to find our way out of here before dark." She was right. The forest was growing dimmer by the minute, shadows deepening, stretching across the trail like grasping fingers. "The map," I said, reaching for Danielle's pack. "Let me see it again." But when she pulled it out, we all stared in disbelief. The map was blank. The printed trails, landmarks, and parking areas all gone, leaving only an empty rectangle of paper. "What the hell?" Tara whispered, taking the map from Danielle's trembling hands. "This isn't possible." A branch snapped loudly in the woods to our right, followed by another peal of that terrible childlike laughter. "We need to cross the creek," I decided, pointing to the other side. "Right now." "Why?" Danielle asked, even as she helped me toward the water's edge. I had no logical answer, only an instinct, a desperate hope that whatever was stalking us might be somehow bound to this side of the water. The creek was wider here than where we'd seen it earlier, the current swifter. Large stones protruded from the rushing water, creating a treacherous but possible path across. "I'll go first," Tara offered, already stepping onto the first stone. She made it look easy, hopping from stone to stone with the grace of a mountain goat. Danielle followed more cautiously, then turned back to offer me her hand. With my injured ankle, crossing was far more difficult. Each stone was slick with spray, threatening to send me tumbling into the dark water. I wobbled precariously on the third stone, arms pinwheeling as I fought for balance. "Careful," Danielle called, reaching out from the stone ahead of me. I regained my balance and continued on, focusing entirely on each step, each stone, forcing myself not to look at the rushing water below or think about what might happen if I fell. I was halfway across when I heard it, a splash behind me, too large to be caused by the current. I turned, balancing carefully on my good foot. On the bank we'd just left stood the figure in the red coat, but it had changed. Its proportions were all wrong now. Limbs too long, head cocked at an impossible angle, that terrible smile stretching literally from ear to ear. "Emily," it called in a voice that was simultaneously a child's and something else, something ancient and hungry. "Don't you want to play with me?" "Don't look at it," Tara urged from the far bank. "Just keep moving." I turned away, focusing on the remaining stones. Just 3 more to go. Behind me, there was another splash. Closer this time. I risked another glance back and immediately wished I hadn't. The thing was on the stones now, following us across the creek. It moved with unnatural speed and grace, covering the distance between us rapidly. "Hurry!" Danielle screamed. I abandoned caution, lunging for the next stone and then the next, ignoring the pain shooting through my ankle. I could feel it behind me, a cold, crawling sensation between my shoulder blades, the certainty of something reaching for me. Danielle and Tara each grabbed one of my arms as I approached the far bank, hauling me over the last few feet. We tumbled together onto the muddy shore just as the creature reached the middle of the creek. And then, to my amazement, it stopped. It stood perfectly still on the center stone, its unnatural smile fading into a look of frustration, rage. "You can't cross," I realized, the words coming out as a half-hysterical laugh. "You can't cross running water." The thing's face contorted, features shifting like melting wax. For a moment, it looked exactly like Lily, my daughter's face staring at me with an expression of hurt and betrayal that broke my heart. "Mommy," it called in Lily's voice, her exact voice. "Why did you leave me?" I took an involuntary step toward the creek before Tara grabbed my arm. "It's not her," she hissed. It's not Lily." The thing on the stone tilted its head, Lily's features melting away, replaced by that too wide smile. "But I could be," it said. "I could be anyone you want." "What is it?" Danielle whispered, her fingers digging into my arm. "What does it want?" "Us," I said simply. "It wants us." As if in confirmation, the creature began to change again, its form elongating, limbs stretching, body thinning until it stood at least 7 feet tall, a vaguely human-shaped collection of angles and sharp edges. Only the red coat remained the same, now hanging in tatters from its twisted frame. "I want the little one," it said, its voice no longer childlike but a deep, rasping growl. "The one that calls to you in the night. Give her to me, and I'll let you go." A wave of protective rage swept through me, driving out fear. "You will never have her," I spat. "Never." The thing laughed, a sound like bones breaking, like earth being torn open. "Then I'll take you instead." It tensed, preparing to leap across the remaining stones. But before it could move, the creek suddenly surged, the water level rising in an instant, sweeping over the stones, creating a rushing torrent where moments before there had been a navigable crossing. The creature howled in fury as the stone beneath it was submerged, dark water swirling around its legs. It seemed unable to move, trapped in the middle of the creek as the water continued to rise. "Run!" I urged, turning away from the horrific sight. "While it's stuck!" We fled into the forest on the far side of the creek, not knowing where we were going, only that we needed to put as much distance as possible between ourselves and that thing. The woods were growing darker by the minute, the last light of day fading rapidly. "We need to find shelter," Danielle gasped as we finally slowed, all of us winded from our flight. "Somewhere to hole up until morning." "If morning comes," Tara muttered, voicing the fear we all shared. I peered through the growing gloom, trying to make out any landmark or feature that might offer protection. The forest here was different from what we'd seen before. Less dense, the trees smaller and more widely spaced. There was an order to their placement that felt deliberate, almost as if… This was an orchard, I realized, looking at the regular spacing of the trees. "These are apple trees." "Which means people," Danielle said, hope creeping into her voice. "Civilization." We moved more purposefully now, following the rows of ancient, gnarled apple trees. They hadn't been tended in years, maybe decades, but their orderly arrangement was unmistakable. The last light was nearly gone when we spotted it, a structure looming against the darkening sky. As we drew closer, I could make out the weathered walls of an old farmhouse, its windows dark, its roof partially collapsed. "Better than nothing," Tara decided, already heading toward it. "Wait," I called, grabbing her arm. "We don't know if it's safe." "Safer than being out in the open when that thing finds a way across the creek," she countered. She had a point, and with night falling and temperatures dropping, we needed shelter. The farmhouse stood in the center of a weed-choked clearing, surrounded by the remnants of what had once been a garden. The front door hung partially open, swinging slightly in the light breeze, an invitation or a warning, I couldn't tell which. "Hello," Danielle called as we approached the porch. "Anyone home?" No response, but I hadn't expected one. The place had clearly been abandoned long ago. The wooden steps creaked ominously as we climbed onto the porch. Tara pushed the door open wider, revealing a darkened interior that smelled of dust and decay. "I have a flashlight," Danielle said, retrieving a small one from her pack. Its beam seemed feeble against the profound darkness of the house's interior, illuminating only a small circle of dusty floorboards and peeling wallpaper. We entered cautiously, alert for any sign of danger, human, animal, or other. The front room was largely empty, containing only a broken chair and the remains of what might have been a table. A doorway led to what appeared to be a kitchen, and a staircase climbed the far wall toward a second floor. "We should check the whole house," Danielle suggested, sweeping the flashlight beam around the room. "Make sure we're alone." The kitchen was in even worse shape than the front room. Cabinets hanging open, their contents long gone, a rusted sink filled with debris that had fallen from the partially collapsed ceiling. A back door stood ajar, leading out to what would have been a backyard. I pushed it closed, testing the lock. It was broken, but we could barricade it with the remains of the kitchen table. "Upstairs?" Tara asked, eyeing the staircase with obvious trepidation. "I'll go," Danielle volunteered, already moving toward the stairs. "Not alone," I insisted, following her despite the protests of my injured ankle. The stairs groaned under our weight, some of the treads giving way entirely, forcing us to step carefully. At the top was a narrow hallway with 3 doors, all closed. Danielle tried the first door. It opened onto a small bedroom containing a rusting iron bed frame and the remains of a mattress, its stuffing spread across the floor as if something had torn it apart. The second room was similar. Another bedroom, slightly larger, with the addition of a wooden dresser whose drawers had been pulled out and tossed aside. But it was the third room that stopped us cold. It had been a child's bedroom. The remains of a small bed stood in one corner, and faded pink wallpaper peeled from the walls. But what caught our attention, what made my blood run cold, were the shoes. Dozens of pairs of children's shoes arranged neatly around the perimeter of the room, and in the center, placed with deliberate care, was a single red sneaker. "We need to leave," I whispered, backing away from the doorway. "Right now." "It's getting dark," Danielle argued, though her voice shook. "We can't wander the forest at night." "We can't stay here," I insisted. "This place, it's connected to that thing somehow." "Then where?" Tara asked, having come up behind us. "Where do we go?" A child's laughter echoed through the house, coming from downstairs. All three of us froze, eyes wide with terror. "It crossed the creek," Tara whispered. "The back door," Danielle realized. "We didn't barricade it yet." More laughter, closer now. The sound of small feet on the stairs. We were trapped. "The window," I hissed, pointing to the window in the second bedroom. "We can climb out." We rushed back to the larger bedroom, Danielle's flashlight beam bouncing wildly across the walls. I reached the window first, struggling with the old, swollen frame. It moved reluctantly, groaning as I forced it upward. Outside was a short, steep roof that covered a first-floor addition, dropping maybe 8 feet to the ground. Not ideal, but better than the alternative. "Go," I urged, helping Tara through the window. She slid down the sloping roof and dropped to the ground with a soft thud. Danielle followed, moving with surprising agility for someone normally so cautious. I was halfway through the window when I heard it, the sound of the bedroom door clicking shut behind me. I turned, heart hammering. In the faint light from Danielle's flashlight below, I could see a small figure standing in the doorway, the red coat vivid even in the near darkness. "Emily," it said, in that terrible voice that was both childlike and ancient. "Don't you want to see your daughter again?" "You're not Lily," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You're nothing like her." "But I could bring her to you," the thing crooned, taking a step closer. "I could bring anyone you've lost. Your friend Melissa who died in college, your grandmother, your old dog, Pepper." A chill ran through me. I'd never spoken of Melissa to Tara or Danielle, and Pepper had died when I was 10. "How do you know those names?" I demanded. The creature's smile widened impossibly. "I know everything about you, Emily Hall. I've been watching you since you arrived. I've been inside your head while you sleep." The scratching at my window, the whispered name, the footprints on the porch. "What are you?" I asked, unable to stop myself. "I am hunger," it replied simply. "I am loneliness. I am the thing that waits in the spaces between trees, that listens for the thoughts you try to hide even from yourself." It took another step toward me. "I can end your pain. Take away the guilt. All you have to do is let me in." "Em," Danielle called from below. "Jump!" The creature's head snapped toward the window, its features contorting with rage. In that moment of distraction, I pushed myself fully through the opening, sliding down the roof and dropping to the ground beside my friends. Pain shot through my injured ankle as I landed, but Tara and Danielle caught me before I could fall, already pulling me away from the house. "Run!" Tara urged, though where to none of us knew. We fled into the orchard, the abandoned farmhouse looming behind us like a sentinel. I risked a glance back and saw the creature framed in the upstairs window, its elongated form seeming to fill the entire opening. Then it was gone, the window empty. "It's coming," I gasped, pushing myself to move faster despite the agony in my ankle. We reached the edge of the orchard where the ordered rows of apple trees gave way once more to wild forest. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, casting the woods in an ethereal silver glow that created more shadows than it banished. "This way," Danielle decided, veering to the right, away from the direction of the creek. We had no choice but to follow, to trust that her sense of direction might lead us to safety. The forest grew denser, the trees closer together, the underbrush more tangled. Our pace slowed inevitably as we were forced to push through thickets and circumnavigate fallen logs. "I don't hear it following," Tara panted after several minutes of desperate flight. We all stopped, listening intently. The forest was alive with night sounds, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, the distant hoot of an owl, the whisper of wind through the trees. But no childlike laughter, no sound of pursuit. "Maybe we lost it," Danielle suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. I leaned against a tree, trying to take weight off my throbbing ankle. "It's toying with us," I said. "It knows exactly where we are." "Then why let us run?" Tara asked. Because it enjoys the game, I replied, the certainty settling in my gut like a stone. It feeds on fear as much as whatever else it wants from us. So, what do we do? Danielle asked, her voice small in the vastness of the night forest. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think through the terror. We need to find our way back to civilization. Back to the trail, the parking lot, the car. How? We've been wandering for hours. The satellite beacon, I remembered suddenly. You brought an emergency beacon, right? Danielle's face lit up. Yes. She reached for her pack, rummaging through it frantically. It's here somewhere. Her expression fell as she continued searching, emptying the contents of her pack onto the forest floor. I don't understand, she murmured. It was right here. Are you sure you packed it? Tara asked. Positive. I checked it before we left the cabin. A soft giggle echoed through the trees around us. It took it, I realized, just like it took the shoe from your pack. The giggle came again, closer this time, followed by a sing-song voice. Emily, Tara, Danielle, come and play. Move, I hissed, already pushing away from the tree I'd been leaning against. We set off again, no direction in mind except away from that voice. The moon provided just enough light to navigate by, though we stumbled often on hidden roots and rocks. The voice followed us, sometimes seeming to come from directly behind, other times from the trees ahead, or to our sides. It was hurting us, I realized, directing our flight through subtle fear. Wait, I gasped, stopping abruptly. We're doing exactly what it wants. Which is what? Tara demanded, wild-eyed with fear. Running. Splitting up, maybe? Getting too tired to think clearly. So, what's the alternative? Danielle asked. Stand and fight? With what? I had no answer. We had no weapons, no way to combat something that wasn't even fully physical as far as I could tell. A branch snapped loudly to our left, followed by the distinct sound of footsteps. Too heavy to belong to the child-sized creature we'd seen. There's someone else out here, Tara whispered. The footsteps grew louder, more deliberate, not trying to hide their approach. Hello, a gruff male voice called. Who's out there? We exchanged glances, hope and suspicion warring on all our faces. Help, Danielle called back. We're lost. The underbrush parted, and a beam of light, much stronger than Danielle's small flashlight, swept over us. Behind it, I could make out the figure of a man in what appeared to be a ranger's uniform. What in God's name are you folks doing out here at night? He demanded, lowering the flashlight slightly so it didn't blind us. He was an older man, maybe in his 60s, with a weathered face and a thick gray beard. His tan uniform bore the patch of the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. We got lost on the Morgan Creek Trail, I explained, relief making my knees weak. We've been trying to find our way back since afternoon. The ranger's bushy eyebrows drew together in confusion. Morgan Creek Trail? That's miles from here. You're in the Flambeau River State Forest now. We stared at him in disbelief. The Flambeau River Forest was at least 20 miles from where we'd started hiking. That's not possible, Tara insisted. We've only been walking for a few hours. The ranger's expression softened slightly. It's easy to get turned around in these woods, especially if you're not familiar with them. Let me get you folks back to my station. You can warm up and I'll drive you back to your car in the morning. It sounded too good to be true. After hours of terror, the sudden appearance of help seemed almost miraculous. Too miraculous. What's your name? I asked, studying the ranger's face carefully. Jim Perkins, he replied easily. I've been patrolling these woods for 30 years. And what were you doing out here at night? His smile never faltered. Routine patrol. We've had reports of illegal campers. Lucky for you, eh? Everything about him seemed genuine. His weathered face, his ranger's uniform, his reasonable explanation. And yet, what color are my daughter's eyes? I asked suddenly. The ranger blinked, confusion crossing his features. Ma'am? My daughter? What color are her eyes? How would I know that? He asked, sounding genuinely puzzled. I sagged with relief. If this had been the creature, it would have known. It had been in my head, had seen my memories of Lily. Sorry, I mumbled. It's been a long day. The ranger nodded sympathetically. I bet. Come on, my station's not far. You folks look like you could use some hot coffee and a place to sit down. He turned, gesturing for us to follow. As he did, his flashlight beam swept across a nearby tree, illuminating a small red shoe hanging from a low branch. I froze, grabbing Danielle's arm in warning. She had seen it too, her body tensing beneath my grip. Something wrong? The ranger asked, turning back to us. Where exactly is your station? Tara asked, her voice admirably steady. Just through these trees. Half a mile, maybe. And you patrol out here alone? At night? A flicker of impatience crossed his face. Is there a problem, miss? Because I can leave you folks out here if you prefer. No problem, Danielle said quickly. Lead the way. The ranger nodded, turning back to the path ahead. As he moved, I noticed something. A slight irregularity in his gait, almost as if his legs were just a little too long for his body. I squeezed Danielle's arm again, a silent warning. Her slight nod told me she'd seen it too. We followed the ranger at a distance, exchanging glances that communicated our shared suspicion and fear. The forest around us had gone silent again. No owls, no rustling leaves, no scurrying creatures, just our footsteps and the too-even pace of the man ahead of us. I don't see a trail, Tara whispered, barely audible even though she walked right beside me. She was right. We were pushing through untamed wilderness, not following any sort of path or track that might lead to a ranger station. The ranger stopped abruptly, turning back to us. In the beam of his flashlight, his face looked different somehow. The proportions subtly wrong, as if his features had been rearranged by someone who didn't quite understand human anatomy. You know, he said, his voice no longer gruff but high and sing-song, it's not polite to whisper. His smile widened, stretching literally from ear to ear. Run! I screamed, already turning back the way we'd come. But the creature was faster. It shed its human disguise like a snake shedding skin, elongating, expanding, its uniform tearing to reveal not flesh but something dark and glistening that absorbed rather than reflected the moonlight. It seized Tara before she could take more than a few steps, long fingers wrapping around her arm. She screamed, a sound of pure terror that echoed through the silent forest. Let her go, Danielle shouted, lunging forward without hesitation. The creature backhanded her with casual strength, sending her flying into a nearby tree with a sickening thud. She slumped to the ground, motionless. Danielle, I cried, torn between helping her and trying to free Tara. The thing that had been pretending to be a ranger lifted Tara off the ground, her feet kicking uselessly in the air as she struggled in its grip. Its face was changing, melting, reforming into something that barely resembled humanity, all jutting angles and two sharp teeth. Let her go, I demanded, desperation making my voice steady. Take me instead. The creature paused, its head tilting at an impossible angle as it regarded me. A sacrifice? It asked, its voice no longer human at all but a rasping, multi-toned monstrosity. How maternal. Yes, I agreed, stepping closer. Me for both of them. Let them go, and I'll stay willingly. No, Tara gasped, still struggling in the thing's grasp. The creature seemed to consider my offer, its two long fingers tightening on Tara's arm until she whimpered in pain. No tricks, it asked, something like amusement in its distorted voice. No tricks, I promised. Just let them go. It smiled, that terrible smile again. But I want all of you, it said simply. Why settle for one when I can have three? With impossible speed, it reached for me with its free hand, fingers extending like elastic, covering the distance between us in an instant. I couldn't dodge, couldn't run, could only watch as those elongated fingers rushed toward me. They never reached me. A blinding light suddenly flooded the clearing, so bright it seemed to turn night into day. The creature shrieked, a sound so alien and agonized it made my ears ring, and released Tara, who fell to the ground in a heap. "Cover your eyes," an unfamiliar voice shouted. I ducked my head, shielding my face with my arm, but not before I glimpsed the source of the light, a powerful flare held aloft by a figure at the edge of the clearing. The creature's screams intensified, becoming something beyond sound, something that vibrated in my bones and made my teeth ache. Then, abruptly, silence. "It's safe now," the voice said. "You can look." I lowered my arm cautiously. The clearing was empty except for us, Danielle still unconscious by the tree, Tara pushing herself to her knees where the creature had dropped her, and our rescuer, an elderly woman holding a now extinguished flare, her white hair gleaming in the moonlight. "What? Who are you?" I gasped. "Name's Margaret Wilson," she replied, moving toward Danielle with surprising agility for her apparent age. "Local, and you folks are in a heap of trouble." She knelt beside Danielle, checking her pulse with practiced efficiency. "She'll be all right," she announced. "Just knocked out." "What was that thing?" Tara asked, her voice shaking as I helped her to her feet. Margaret's lined face grew somber. "Old as these forests. Hungry as winter. It has many names, but the Ojibwe called it the Wendigo." "A Wendigo," I repeated, "but that's just a legend." Margaret gave me a look that made me feel foolish. "Tell that to your friend here," she said, nodding at Danielle's unconscious form. "Legends have teeth in these woods." She produced a small vial from her pocket and waved it under Danielle's nose. Danielle sputtered and coughed, her eyes fluttering open. What happened?" she mumbled, struggling to sit up. "Later," Margaret said firmly. "First, we need to get you all somewhere safe. It'll be back when the light fades." "The flare drove it away?" I asked. Margaret nodded. "They hate the light, especially fire, but it won't stay gone long." She helped Danielle to her feet, supporting her with surprising strength. "My cabin's not far. We need to hurry." "Can we trust her?" Tara whispered as Margaret led Danielle a few paces ahead. "Do we have a choice?" I whispered back. "Besides, if she wanted to hurt us, she could have let that thing do it." We followed Margaret through the forest, moving at a pace that seemed reckless given the darkness and uneven ground. But our guide never faltered, navigating the woods as if it were broad daylight. After about 20 minutes of walking, a small cabin came into view, a sturdy, well-maintained structure nestled in a small clearing. Unlike the abandoned farmhouse, this place radiated warmth and security. Light glowed from its windows and smoke curled from its chimney. "Home sweet home," Margaret announced, leading us up the porch steps. Inside, the cabin was a single room with a loft accessible by ladder. A wood stove occupied one wall, a small kitchen area another. The furniture was simple but comfortable looking. A table with 4 chairs, a sofa, a rocking chair by the stove. "Sit," Margaret instructed, guiding Danielle to the sofa. "I'll make tea." We all obeyed, too exhausted and shell-shocked to do anything else. The warmth of the cabin seemed to seep into my bones, making me realize just how cold I'd been out in the night forest. Margaret bustled about the kitchen area, putting a kettle on the stove, retrieving mugs from a cupboard. Her movements were precise, economical, nothing like the disjointed, unnatural motions of the creature. "You're not another trick, are you?" I asked suddenly, the question escaping before I could stop it. Margaret turned, fixing me with a penetrating stare. "If I were, would I tell you?" "The Wendigo knew things," I explained. "Personal things. It could take forms." "Skinwalker," she corrected. "Not Wendigo. Similar but different. Wendigos are born of human greed and cannibalism. Skinwalkers are something else." "What exactly?" Tara asked. Margaret set mugs of steaming tea in front of each of us before settling into her rocking chair. "Some say they were human once. Medicine men who abused their power turned to dark magic. Others say they were never human at all, just things that learned to wear our shapes. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, drawing comfort from its heat. It knew my daughter's name, I said quietly. It knew about people from my past that I've never mentioned to anyone out here. They get inside your head, Margaret nodded. Read your fears, your guilt, your deepest secrets. Use them against you. How do you know so much about them? Danielle asked, her voice hoarse. Margaret was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames visible through the grate of the wood stove. My husband, she said finally, 30 years ago. It took him right from our yard. Wore his face to try to take me too, but I recognized it wasn't him. Been studying them ever since. I'm sorry, I said, inadequate but sincere. She waved away my sympathy. Long time ago now. But these woods have never been safe, not really. Every few years, hikers disappear. Hunters too. The authorities blame it on accidents, exposure, bears, but I know better. Why stay? Tara asked. If it's so dangerous? Margaret's weathered face hardened. Someone has to remember. Someone has to warn folks. And someone has to fight it. Can it be killed? I asked. Not by me, she admitted. Not yet, but I can hurt it. Drive it back. Save who I can. She stood abruptly, moving to a trunk in the corner of the room. From it, she withdrew 3 small bundles of dried herbs tied with red thread. Put these in your pockets, she instructed, handing one to each of us. Sage, sweetgrass, and cedar. Protection against its influence. I accepted the bundle, breathing in its pungent, earthy scent. Will this really help? It can't stop it physically, Margaret explained, but it might keep it from getting in your heads again, from creating illusions you'll believe. Like the forest ranger, Danielle said. Margaret nodded. Or a lost child, or a friend calling for help. We sat in silence for a moment, each absorbing this information, this new reality where ancient evils hunted in the Wisconsin forests and only bundles of dried herbs stood between us and possession or death. How do we get home? Tara asked finally, the question we all wanted answered. Back to our cabin, our car? I'll guide you, Margaret said. At first light. The skinwalker is weaker during the day, though not powerless. We'll have a better chance. How far are we from the Morgan Creek trailhead? I asked. Margaret's expression was grave. Further than you think. It led you in circles, deeper into its territory. We're at least 15 miles from where you started. 15 miles? Danielle repeated in disbelief. We can't have walked that far. Distance works differently in its domain, Margaret explained. Time too, sometimes. It bends reality around itself. That explained how we'd covered so much ground without realizing it. We'd been in the creature's web from the moment we stepped onto that trail. Get some rest, Margaret advised, gesturing to the sofa and a small cot in the corner. We leave at dawn. Sleep seemed impossible despite my exhaustion. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that terrible too-wide smile, those elongated fingers reaching for me. But eventually, the warmth of the cabin and the rhythmic creak of Margaret's rocking chair lulled me into an uneasy slumber. I dreamed of Lily, not the skinwalker's perversion, but my actual daughter, her gap-toothed smile genuine, her eyes bright with life. In the dream, she was calling to me from the edge of the forest, beckoning me to follow. I knew I shouldn't, knew it was dangerous, but I couldn't stop myself from moving toward her. Just as I reached the tree line, she changed, her sweet face elongating, teeth sharpening, eyes darkening to bottomless pits. I woke with a gasp, heart hammering. The cabin was quiet except for Tara's soft snoring from the cot and Danielle's even breathing beside me on the sofa. Margaret was gone, but a note on the table read, "Checking the perimeter. Stay inside. M." Dawn was just beginning to lighten the eastern sky outside the windows. I sat up slowly, trying not to wake my friends. My ankle throbbed dully, and every muscle in my body ached from yesterday's desperate flight through the forest. I limped to the window, peering out at the small clearing around the cabin. The forest beyond seemed less menacing in the growing light. Just trees. Ordinary trees, their branches stirring gently in the morning breeze. Movement caught my eye. Margaret emerging from the woods on the far side of the clearing. She carried an ancient-looking rifle and moved with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in the wilderness. Seeing her approach, I felt some of my tension ease. We had a guide now, someone who understood what we were facing. "Coffee?" I offered when she entered, gesturing to the percolator I'd found and figured out how to use. She nodded gratefully, setting her rifle carefully by the door. "The others still sleeping?" "For now. Let them rest a bit longer?" "Good idea. We've got a long day ahead." We sat at the small table, mugs of steaming coffee warming our hands. Outside, the dawn chorus of birds had begun, a reassuringly normal sound after the unnatural silence of the night forest. "You said you've been studying these skinwalkers." "For 30 years," I said quietly. "Has anyone else ever escaped one?" Margaret's eyes, faded blue with age but still sharp as flint, met mine. "Few, very few. What happened to them afterward?" She understood my real question. Most left the area, never returned to the woods. Some couldn't adjust to normal life again. Knowing what's really out there changes a person. I nodded, thinking of how this experience would shape me, how I would ever explain it to David when it came time to arrange custody visits with Lily. "It was trying to get to Lily through me," I said softly. "My daughter." "It uses what you love most," Margaret confirmed. "That's its power. It finds the deepest connection and twists it. But why? What does it want?" Margaret took a long sip of her coffee before answering. "To feed. Not just on flesh, though it takes that too. On fear, on grief, on the severing of bonds that it can never understand." A chill ran through me despite the warmth of the cabin. "Will it follow us when we leave the forest?" "Its power is tied to this place," she said. "The further you get from its territory, the weaker its influence. But the memories, those you'll take with you." Danielle stirred on the sofa, then sat up, blinking in the early morning light. "Is that coffee I smell?" By the time we'd all eaten a simple breakfast of oatmeal and dried fruit, the sun had fully risen. Margaret outlined her plan as we prepared to leave. "We'll follow the old logging road," she explained, tracing a route on a hand-drawn map. "It's longer than cutting straight through the forest, but safer, more exposed. The skinwalker prefers darkness, shadows." "What if it finds us anyway?" Tara asked, voicing the fear we all shared. Margaret patted the rifle slung over her shoulder. "Silver bullets. Won't kill it, but they'll slow it down, and I've got these." She held up what looked like homemade flares. "Light drives it back. Fire hurts it." She distributed the flares among us, one for each. "Last resort," she warned. "They don't last long." As we stepped outside into the morning light, I felt a complex mixture of hope and dread. The forest in daylight seemed almost welcoming. Birds singing, sunlight dappling the ground through the canopy. It was hard to believe that something ancient and malevolent lurked among these trees. The old logging road was little more than a wide trail now, nature reclaiming what humans had abandoned. But it was relatively flat and clear of the worst underbrush, making our progress faster than it had been the previous day. Margaret set a brisk pace despite her age, her eyes constantly scanning the forest around us. We walked in a tight group, Margaret in front, Tara and Danielle in the middle, me bringing up the rear despite my injured ankle. The thought of being the last in line, potentially closest to anything that might follow, made my skin crawl, but I insisted on the position. My friends had suffered enough because of my decision to continue the hike when I first felt something was wrong. The morning passed without incident. The forest around us seemed normal, squirrels chattering in the branches, the occasional deer bounding away at our approach. I began to hope that perhaps the skinwalker had given up, moved on to easier prey. We stopped at midday to rest and eat the sandwiches Margaret had packed. Sitting on fallen logs beside the trail, we almost could have been ordinary hikers on an ordinary outing. "How much further?" Danielle asked, massaging her shoulder where it had hit the tree the night before. "About 6 miles to the main road," Margaret replied. "Then another mile or so to the Morgan Creek trailhead. We should reach it by late afternoon if we keep a good pace." "And then what?" Tara asked. "Our car is there, but our cabin is miles away." "I'll drive you," Margaret offered. "I keep an old truck at a friend's place near the trailhead, for emergencies." Like rescuing people from supernatural predators, I thought but didn't say. We were just gathering our things to continue when I noticed something. A strange silence had fallen over the forest. The birdsong that had accompanied our journey all morning had ceased. The rustling of small creatures in the underbrush had gone quiet. Margaret noticed it too, her body tensing, hand moving to her rifle. "We need to move," she said quietly. "Now." We set off at a faster pace, no longer stopping to rest or admire the scenery. The silence followed us, an absence so profound it seemed to press against my eardrums. "It's watching us," I whispered, unable to keep the observation to myself. Margaret nodded grimly. "It knows we're trying to leave its territory." "Will it try to stop us?" Danielle asked. "Count on it." We walked faster, the logging road beginning to descend gradually as we approached what Margaret called the eastern boundary of the skinwalker's domain. The forest was changing subtly, the trees younger, less twisted, more of the white pine and birch that were common in this part of Wisconsin. "We're getting close to the edge of its territory," Margaret explained, seeing my questioning look. "Its influence changes the very nature of the forest over time." That was when we heard it, a child crying. The sound so authentically distressed that it made my maternal instincts flare despite knowing what it really was. "Ignore it," Margaret commanded. "Whatever you hear, whatever you see, keep moving forward. Don't look back." The crying intensified, becoming more desperate, more heart-wrenching. Then a voice. Lily's voice, but I knew it wasn't really her. "Mommy, help me, it hurts." I squeezed my eyes shut briefly, forcing myself to keep walking. Beside me, Tara reached for my hand, squeezing it in silent support. "Emily, please." The voice was changing, becoming deeper, distorting into something inhuman. "You abandoned her just like you abandoned me." The last part wasn't in Lily's voice at all, but in David's, my ex-husband's accusation hitting a nerve so raw I physically flinched. "It's not real," Danielle reminded me, her voice steady despite the fear I could see in her eyes. "It's trying to get in your head." "I know," I managed, though each false cry from my daughter felt like a knife to my heart. The forest around us darkened as clouds rolled in, obscuring the sun. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees in a matter of moments. "It's manipulating the environment," Margaret warned, increasing her pace. "We need to hurry." We broke into a jog, Margaret in the lead, unflinching as the cries and pleas continued all around us. The voices multiplied. Now it wasn't just Lily and David, but my mother, my friends, even Tara and Danielle themselves, though they ran right beside me. "Emily, help!" Tara's voice called from the forest, even as the real Tara gripped my hand tighter. "It's got me." "Don't listen," the real Tara urged. "It's not me. I'm right here." The path ahead of us suddenly split, branching in 3 different directions. Margaret stopped abruptly, her expression confused. "This isn't right," she muttered. "The road doesn't fork here." "Which way?" Danielle asked, anxiety making her voice rise. Margaret pulled out her hand-drawn map, studying it with a frown. "None of these paths should exist. It's trying to separate us." That's when I saw them. Footprints in the dirt of the center path. Small footprints like a child's, leading away into the forest. "Margaret," I said, pointing. "Look." She studied the footprints, her lined face grim. "A trap," she declared. "We stick together. This way." She pointed to the leftmost path. "But how do you know?" Tara asked. "I don't," Margaret admitted, "but neither does it. It's creating confusion, trying to make us doubt. We pick a direction and stick to it. Together." We followed her down the left-hand path, now holding hands to ensure we wouldn't be separated. The forest grew darker still, the clouds overhead thickening into an unnatural twilight, though it was barely mid-afternoon. The path began to look familiar in a way that made my stomach clench with dread. The trees, the curve of the trail, the rock formation to our right. "We're going in circles," I realized aloud. "This is the same stretch of path we passed an hour ago." Margaret stopped, her expression troubled. "You're right. It's manipulating the landscape." "So, what do we do?" Danielle asked, an edge of panic in her voice. Margaret reached into her pocket and withdrew a small compass. She held it flat on her palm, and we all watched as the needle spun wildly, unable to find north. "As I feared," she murmured. "We need another way to navigate." "The sun," Tara suggested. "Hidden by clouds that shouldn't be there," Margaret pointed out. "The moss on the trees," Danielle offered. "It grows more on the north side, right?" "Not reliable enough," Margaret said, "and I don't trust anything in this forest right now." I closed my eyes, thinking desperately. We needed something the skinwalker couldn't manipulate, couldn't fake, something real. My hand went to my pocket, feeling the outline of my phone. Still no signal, of course, but maybe. "The GPS," I said suddenly. "Even without a signal, the GPS should still work." "Worth a try," Margaret agreed. I pulled out my phone, opening the map application. For a long moment, the location indicator spun uselessly. Then, to my immense relief, it stabilized, showing our position as a blue dot in a sea of green. "It works!" I exclaimed. "We're here." I showed Margaret the screen, and the main road should be that way. I pointed east of our current position. "Let's go," she said, taking the lead again. "And Emily, keep that phone out. It's our best chance." We abandoned the deceptive path, striking out directly through the forest in the direction my phone indicated. The going was harder without a trail. Dense underbrush slowed our progress, fallen logs and hidden holes threatened to trip us with each step. The voices followed us, growing more desperate, more threatening. The false Lily now screamed in pain. The false David hurled vicious accusations. New voices joined the chorus. My grandmother, dead for a decade, begging for help. My college roommate Melissa, who had died in a car accident, asking why I'd let her drive that night. "Block it out," Margaret instructed. "Focus on something real, something the creature can't touch." I thought of Lily, not the skinwalker's twisted version, but my real daughter. Her laugh when I tickled her. The serious look on her face when she concentrated on her homework. The way she still wanted me to check for monsters under the bed, even at 9 years old. The memory anchored me, gave me strength to push forward despite the exhaustion and fear that threatened to overwhelm me. We'd been bushwhacking for nearly an hour when the forest began to thin. The trees were younger here, more widely spaced. The manufactured twilight had lightened somewhat, allowing more natural illumination. "We're getting close," Margaret said, hope in her voice for the first time. "The main road can't be far now." That's when we heard it. The growl. Low, rumbling, vibrating the very air around us. Nothing natural made that sound. "Keep moving," Margaret ordered, unslinging her rifle. The growl came again, closer this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of something large moving through the underbrush behind us. "It's done playing games," Margaret said grimly. "Run! Now!" We broke into a desperate sprint, crashing through the forest with no attempt at stealth. I could hear it behind us, branches snapping, undergrowth crushing beneath heavy footfalls. Too close. Getting closer. Tara screamed as something caught her foot, a root or vine that seemed to have risen from the ground specifically to trap her. She went down hard, sprawling in the dirt. Danielle and I pulled her up, but those few seconds cost us. The crashing behind us accelerated, the growl becoming a roar that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Keep going," Margaret shouted, stopping and turning to face whatever pursued us. She raised her rifle, aiming into the shadowed forest behind. "Margaret, no," I called. "Come with us." "I'll hold it off," she insisted. "Get to the road. Don't stop, no matter what you hear." We hesitated, torn between survival and abandoning the woman who had saved us. "Go," she commanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. We ran, Tara limping but determined, Danielle supporting her on one side, me on the other. Behind us, Margaret's rifle cracked once, twice, the sound unnaturally loud in the forest. Then a scream, human, female, agonized. "Don't look back," I gasped, though every instinct demanded I turn, go to Margaret's aid. We pushed forward, the forest opening up more with each step. Ahead, through the trees, I could see something that made my heart leap. A strip of asphalt. The main road Margaret had promised would lead us to safety. Behind us, something howled, a sound of rage and hunger that made the hair on my neck stand on end. Closer than it should have been. Too close. "There," Danielle shouted, pointing ahead. "The road." We broke through the final line of trees onto the shoulder of a 2-lane highway. The normality of it, the yellow center line, the weathered asphalt, the metal guardrail, seemed almost shocking after the warped reality of the forest. "Which way?" Tara gasped, clutching her side where a stitch had formed. I checked my phone, relieved to see we now had a single bar of service. "The trailhead is that way," I said, pointing north, "about a mile." We set off along the shoulder, moving as quickly as our exhausted bodies would allow. Each step took us further from the forest's edge, from the domain of the thing that had hunted us. I could feel its rage like a physical pressure against my back, but I refused to turn, refused to acknowledge it. We'd gone perhaps a quarter mile when a truck appeared around a bend ahead, heading toward us. Danielle stepped into the road, waving her arms frantically. The truck slowed, then pulled onto the shoulder beside us. The driver, a middle-aged man in a flannel shirt, rolled down his window. "You folks all right?" he asked, concern evident in his weathered face. "Our friend," I gasped, pointing back toward the forest. "She's still in there. She needs help." The man frowned, following my gesture. "In the woods? What happened?" How could we possibly explain? That an ancient shape-shifting monster had hunted us, that it had probably killed the woman who'd saved us. "Hiking accident," Danielle said smoothly. "She fell. Couldn't walk. She sent us for help." The man was already reaching for his phone. "I'll call search and rescue. Where exactly is she?" "About a mile in," I said, knowing it was hopeless. If the skinwalker had taken Margaret, no rescue team would find her. At least, not alive. The man made the call while we huddled by his truck, the ordinariness of the highway surreal after our ordeal. When he finished, he turned to us. "They're sending a team. They want you to wait at the ranger station to give a statement. I can drive you there. It's on my way." We accepted gratefully, crowding into the cab of his pickup. As we pulled away, I finally allowed myself to look back at the forest. For just a moment, I thought I saw a figure at the tree line. Tall, too tall, with limbs that didn't bend quite right. Then it was gone, melting back into the shadows beneath the trees. The ranger station was a hive of activity when we arrived. Search and rescue personnel gathering equipment, radios crackling with coordinates and instructions. We gave our statement to a sympathetic ranger, describing Margaret as a local woman who'd helped us when we got lost, who'd stayed behind when she was injured because she insisted we go for help. I knew they wouldn't find her, knew that whatever remained of Margaret Wilson would never be discovered. The skinwalker would see to that. They drove us to our car at the Morgan Creek trailhead, which sat alone in the small parking area, just as we'd left it the day before. Had it only been a day? It felt like weeks had passed, like we'd aged years in those woods. The drive back to our rental cabin was silent. each of us lost in our own thoughts, processing the horror we'd experienced. When we finally pulled up to the cabin, the sight of it, so normal, so ordinary, brought tears to my eyes. Inside, everything was just as we'd left it. Wine glasses still on the coffee table, the fireplace cold with old ashes. Tara immediately went to check that we could actually leave, that the doors opened to the real world and not to some continuation of the Skinwalker's domain. Danielle headed for the bathroom, probably to wash away as much of the forest as she could. I stood in the middle of the living room, suddenly uncertain what to do. My phone vibrated in my pocket, signal fully restored now that we were back in civilization. I pulled it out to find a series of text messages and missed calls from David. The most recent text read, "Getting worried. Lily wants to talk to you. Call when you can. Lily, my daughter, safe at home with her father, far from the horrors of that forest." The thought broke something inside me, and I sank onto the couch, tears finally coming in a flood that I couldn't stop. That's how Danielle found me minutes later, crying uncontrollably, my phone clutched in my hand. She sat beside me, putting an arm around my shoulders, offering silent comfort. "We made it," she said softly when my tears had subsided somewhat. "We're alive." "Margaret isn't," I replied, guilt washing over me. "She died, saving us." "She chose to stay," Danielle reminded me gently. "It was her fight, had been for 30 years. She wouldn't want us to blame ourselves." I knew she was right, but it didn't ease the weight in my chest. "What do we tell people?" I asked. "About what happened?" "Nothing," Tara said, emerging from her room where she'd been checking the windows. "Who would believe us?" She was right. We'd be dismissed as hysterical, traumatized by a simple case of getting lost in the woods. The Skinwalker's existence would remain a secret, known only to those unfortunate few who encountered it and survived. "We leave," Danielle decided. "First thing tomorrow. Go home." No one argued. The cabin that had seemed so charming just days ago now felt too close to the forest, too vulnerable. Every shadow made me flinch. Every creak of settling wood sent my heart racing. That night, we pushed the couch against the front door and took turns keeping watch, none of us willing to sleep simultaneously despite our exhaustion. I used my watch to call David, to hear Lily's voice, to reassure myself that she was safe. I didn't tell them what had happened, only that the trip wasn't going as planned and we'd be coming home early. We left at dawn, the rising sun a promise of safety I only half believed. As we drove away, I looked back at the forest one last time. In the distance, barely visible against the dark pines, I thought I saw a figure. Too tall, too thin, watching our departure. I looked away, pressing the accelerator harder. We survived. We escaped. But I knew with cold certainty that something had followed us out of those woods. Not the Skinwalker itself, but the knowledge of it. The awareness that the world was not what we'd thought, that ancient things lurked in the shadows of ordinary places, hungry and patient. That night in my own bed, with my apartment door double-locked and my phone close at hand, I dreamed of the forest again. Of Margaret, her face transforming into something inhuman as she stood beneath that tree hung with children's shoes. Of a child's laughter echoing through the darkness. I woke, heart pounding, to a sound that froze my blood, scratching, faint but unmistakable, at my bedroom window. I lay perfectly still, barely breathing as it continued. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Like nails on glass. Like something trying to get in. Then a whisper, so soft I might have imagined it. "Emily." I reached for my phone with trembling fingers, dialing Danielle's number. She answered on the first ring, her voice alert despite the hour. "Did I wake you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I wasn't sleeping," she replied, and I could hear the same fear in her voice that I felt. "Tara called an hour ago. She heard something." The scratching at my window stopped abruptly. I counted to 10, 20, 30. Nothing. just the normal sounds of my apartment building at night. "Do you think it followed us?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer. "Not physically," Danielle said after a long pause, "but in our minds. I think it'll always be with us now." She was right. The skinwalker had marked us somehow, had claimed a piece of our consciousness. We had escaped its forest, but we would never truly leave its territory. It would wait in our dreams, in the shadows of our rooms, in the spaces between our thoughts, patient and hungry and eternal. My name is Emily Hall, and I am 32 years old. This happened in the summer of 2022 near the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest in northern Wisconsin. I'm telling this story as a warning. Stay on marked trails. Don't follow voices in the woods. And if you hear a child laughing where no child should be, run. Run, and don't look back. My name is Emily Hall, and I am 28 years old. This happened in the northern reaches of the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest in Wisconsin just 3 months ago. I'd always been the cautious one in our group, the planner, the one who packed extra supplies and studied the maps before any trip. But even my thoroughness couldn't have prepared us for what awaited in those woods. There were 5 of us who made the trip that weekend, all colleagues from Milwaukee General Hospital where we worked as nurses. Sarah Rodriguez, our unofficial leader who organized most of our outings, Melissa Scott, the newest addition to our unit who was eager to bond, Catherine Collins, who'd grown up camping and considered herself an outdoors woman, Rebecca Hill, who had reluctantly agreed to come after weeks of persuasion, and myself. We'd been planning this trip for months as a way to decompress after the brutal winter shift schedule. The Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest seemed perfect, remote enough to disconnect but with established trails for our varying experience levels. Our destination was the area near Wabeno, specifically a backcountry trail called Hollow Creek Path that Catherine swore offered the most breathtaking views of the forest and nearby Lost Lake. We arrived on a Friday afternoon in early May. The tourist season hadn't fully begun, so the ranger station was quiet when we checked in. The ranger, a weathered man in his 60s named Frank Tanner, seemed distracted as he processed our backcountry permits. "Hollow Creek, huh?" he muttered, glancing up from his paperwork. "Haven't had many folks head that way lately." "Is there something wrong with the trail?" Sarah asked, always direct. Frank hesitated. "No, nothing wrong, just there've been some reports of unusual activity in that section. Probably nothing, but some hikers said they heard strange noises at night, likely just wolves returning to the area." Rebecca immediately tensed beside me. "Wolves? You didn't mention wolves." "Sarah, they're more afraid of you than you are of them," Catherine said dismissively. "We'll store our food properly and make noise on the trails. It'll be fine." Frank cleared his throat. "Just stick to the marked paths, especially around dusk. The Hollow Creek area has some history. Old logging accidents back in the day. Some folks get a bit spooked. We'll be careful," I assured him, accepting our permits. But something in his expression left me uneasy. It wasn't concern about wolves or typical wilderness dangers. It was something deeper, something he wasn't saying. "One more thing," he added as we turned to leave. "If you see anyone else out there, which you shouldn't since you're the only group with permits for that section this weekend, don't approach them. Just radio in. Cell service is spotty, but emergency channels should work." That seemed odd, but I nodded anyway. The first part of our hike was uneventful. The trail wound through dense pine forest, occasionally opening to reveal stunning vistas of the surrounding wilderness. The late afternoon sun filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. The air was cool and crisp, heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. We talked and laughed as we hiked, sharing hospital gossip and enjoying the respite from our typically chaotic workdays. By the time we reached our designated campsite near Hollow Creek, we were tired but in good spirits. The site was a small clearing surrounded by towering hemlocks and white pines with Hollow Creek gurgling nearby. A shallow, clear stream that reflected the darkening sky. We worked together to set up our 3 tents, Sarah and Melissa sharing one, Catherine and Rebecca another, and I took the small solo tent since I notoriously tossed and turned. As Catherine got a fire going, I wandered to the edge of the clearing to filter water from the creek. That's when I first felt it, the subtle wrongness. The water was cold against my fingers, but not as cold as it should have been in early May, so recently after the spring thaw, and despite its clarity, I couldn't see the bottom clearly, even in the shallows. "Emily, everything okay?" Sarah called. I straightened, shaking water from my hands. "Yeah, all good, just taking it in." But as I turned back toward camp, I couldn't help noticing how the forest seemed to absorb sound around us. Our voices didn't carry, didn't echo, they just stopped, as if swallowed by the trees themselves. We cooked a simple dinner of dehydrated camping meals over Catherine's expertly built fire. As darkness fell completely, we gathered around the flames, sharing stories and passing around a flask of whiskey that Sarah had smuggled in for medicinal purposes. "So, what was that about the area having history?" Melissa asked, hugging her knees to her chest as the night air grew colder. Catherine leaned forward, her face taking on the exaggerated expression she always wore when telling stories to pediatric patients. "Well, since you asked, Hollow Creek isn't just named for the shape of the valley. Back in the 1880s, this was a major logging area. The story goes that a crew of loggers disappeared one winter, just vanished. When spring came, another crew found their camp abandoned, but something was wrong." "Wrong how?" Rebecca asked, despite looking like she already regretted the question. Their belongings were all there, food still on plates, but the loggers, all 12 of them, were gone. No tracks in the snow, no signs of struggle, just empty clothing laid out as if the men had somehow disappeared from inside them. "That's just an urban legend," Sarah scoffed, though she glanced uneasily at the darkness beyond our fire. "Maybe," Catherine shrugged. "But in the 1950s, a family went missing in these same woods. The father was found 3 days later, wandering alone, completely incoherent. He kept saying his wife and children had been hollowed out. They never found the rest of the family." "Okay, that's enough," I interrupted, noticing how Rebecca had gone pale. "We're here to relax, not scare ourselves sleepless." Fine, Catherine grinned. "But just so you know, they say if you listen closely on still nights, you can hear—" A sharp crack from the forest cut her off. We all froze. "Probably just a branch falling," I said after a moment. But we all knew that the sound had been too deliberate, too close. "I'm going to check the food bag," Sarah said, standing abruptly. We'd hung our supplies from a tall pine at the edge of the clearing, away from our tents. "I'll come with you," I offered, not wanting anyone to go alone. We walked to the tree, our headlamps cutting through the darkness. The bag hung undisturbed exactly where we'd left it. But as we turned to head back, Sarah grabbed my arm. "Did you see that?" she whispered. "What?" "I thought I saw a light, through the trees, maybe a quarter mile that way." She pointed deeper into the forest, away from the trail. I stared, but saw nothing except impenetrable darkness. "Probably just your headlamp reflecting off something." She didn't look convinced, but nodded. "Yeah, you're right." When we returned to the fire, the mood had shifted. The easy conversation was gone, replaced by an undercurrent of tension. We turned in earlier than planned, each of us crawling into our sleeping bags with mumbled goodnights. Inside my tent, I listened to the night sounds, the occasional rustle of nocturnal animals, the soft murmur of the creek, the whisper of wind through pine needles, normal sounds that should have been comforting but somehow weren't. I must have eventually fallen asleep because I woke with a start hours later. The forest was eerily silent. No insects, no wind, nothing. My watch read 3:17 a.m. A soft scratching sound came from outside my tent, gentle, rhythmic, like fingers trailing along the nylon. I held my breath, straining to listen. The scratching moved slowly around the perimeter of my tent, pausing at the door. "Hello?" I whispered, immediately regretting making any sound at all. The scratching stopped. For several heartbeats, there was nothing. Then, a voice, so faint I almost thought I imagined it. Emily. It wasn't the voice of any of my friends. It was hollow, distant, as if spoken through water or from very far away. Goosebumps erupted across my skin. "Who's there?" I tried to sound authoritative, but my voice trembled. No answer. I fumbled for my headlamp and switched it on, the beam illuminating the interior of my tent. The nylon walls revealed no shadows of anyone standing outside. I waited, scarcely breathing, for what felt like an eternity. Finally, I unzipped the tent door just enough to peer out. The clearing was bathed in pale moonlight. Our campfire had died to embers. All was still, too still. The other tents stood silent and undisturbed, but something felt profoundly wrong. I slipped on my boots and climbed out, zipping the tent behind me. The air felt thick, almost viscous in my lungs, and it was warm. Unnaturally warm for a May night in northern Wisconsin. I moved toward the fire pit, intending to stoke the embers and add another log. As I passed Sarah and Melissa's tent, I hesitated, then quietly called out, "Sarah, you awake?" No response. I moved on, telling myself they were simply sleeping soundly after our long hike. I crouched by the fire, stirring the coals with a stick and adding a small piece of wood from our stockpile. As the flames flickered to life, I glanced up and froze. At the edge of the clearing, partially hidden by shadows, stood a figure. Tall and unnaturally thin, it seemed to sway slightly, though there was no wind. I couldn't make out features, just its silhouette against the deeper darkness of the forest. "Hello?" My voice cracked. "This is a private campsite." The figure didn't move or respond. I reached slowly for my pocket knife, the only weapon I had. "I can see you," I said more firmly. "Who are you?" The figure took a single step backward, melting into the trees. I stood quickly, heart hammering. Part of me wanted to wake the others, to verify I wasn't hallucinating from exhaustion. But a stronger instinct told me to keep watch, to stand guard. I added more wood to the fire, building it higher than necessary. The growing flames pushed back the darkness but created dancing shadows that made the forest seem alive with movement. I sat with my back to the fire, facing the spot where I'd seen the figure. Time crawled. Every snapping twig or rustling leaf sent fresh adrenaline coursing through me. At some point, I must have dozed off sitting upright because suddenly I jerked awake to early dawn light and a hand on my shoulder. "Emily? Did you sleep out here?" It was Catherine, looking concerned. I blinked, disoriented. There was someone, by the trees, watching us. Catherine frowned, scanning the tree line. "An animal, maybe? Bear or deer?" "No," I said firmly. "It was a person, or something shaped like a person." She didn't look convinced, but was kind enough not to dismiss me outright. "Well, whatever it was, it's gone now. You should have woken me up. I brought my dad's old revolver." That surprised me. "You brought a gun? Is that even legal here?" She shrugged. "Better to have it and not need it, especially after what the ranger said." The others emerged from their tents as we talked. I told them what had happened, careful to stick to facts and not let Catherine's stories from the night before color my description. Sarah suggested it might have been another hiker, despite what the ranger had said about us being the only group with permits. "We should report it when we get back," she said pragmatically. "But for now, let's eat and get moving. We have that viewpoint to reach, and I want good light for photos." No one mentioned leaving early, though I could tell Rebecca was thinking it. We ate a quick breakfast of instant oatmeal and coffee, packed our day packs, and secured the campsite for our hike to Lost Lake Lookout, which Catherine promised was worth the 4-mile trek. The day was overcast but warm as we set out. The trail climbed steadily through the forest, occasionally offering glimpses of the rolling landscape beyond. Under normal circumstances, I would have found it beautiful, invigorating. But I couldn't shake the lingering unease from the night before. About 2 miles in, we crossed a small wooden footbridge over a section of hollow creek that had carved a deep ravine. The water below churned dark and fast, swollen with spring runoff. As we paused to catch our breath, I noticed Melissa staring intently into the gorge. "What is it?" I asked, moving beside her. She pointed. "I thought I saw something caught in the rocks down there. Something red." We all peered over the railing. The creek bed was littered with fallen trees and boulders, creating small eddies and pools. And there, partially submerged near the far bank, was a splash of crimson that didn't belong in the natural palette of the forest. "Probably just trash," Sarah said. "Some inconsiderate hiker's discarded gear." "I'm going down to check," Catherine decided, already looking for a path down the steep embankment. "That's not safe," Rebecca protested. "The current looks strong." "I'll be careful," Catherine insisted. "If someone's hurt or lost equipment, we should help." Before anyone could argue further, she was picking her way down a game trail that zigzagged to the water's edge. We watched anxiously as she navigated the slippery rocks, making her way toward the red object. When she reached it, she stopped. Even from above, I could see her posture change, her shoulders tensing, her body going rigid. "Catherine," Sarah called down. "What is it?" When Catherine looked up at us, her face had drained of color. "It's a backpack. There's blood on it." My stomach dropped. "Is there any ID?" Catherine gingerly opened the pack, keeping it on the rock where she'd found it. She pulled out a waterlogged wallet and flipped it open. "Driver's license says Daniel Lopez, from Madison." "We need to call for help," Rebecca said immediately. "Someone could be hurt." Sarah was already pulling out the emergency radio the ranger had insisted we take. She turned it on and tried several channels, but only static answered. "Let me try higher ground," she said, moving further along the bridge to a slight rise. The rest of us stayed focused on Catherine, who was now carefully examining the area around where she'd found the backpack. "There are marks here," she called up to us. "In the mud, like something was dragged." "Don't follow them," I said sharply. "Just come back up." Catherine nodded and began making her way back to the trail, clutching the wallet and leaving the backpack where she'd found it. But halfway up, she paused, looking at something we couldn't see from our vantage point. "Catherine," Melissa called. "What's wrong?" "There's a path here," Catherine replied, voice tight. "It's not on the map. It leads that way." She pointed upstream into denser forest. "So, what? Come back up," Rebecca urged. But Catherine was already changing direction, moving along whatever trail she'd discovered. "I just want to check where it goes. It looks used. Recently used." "Catherine," I called, alarmed. "Don't go off alone." She either didn't hear me or chose to ignore my warning. Within seconds, the underbrush had swallowed her from view. "Damn it," Sarah muttered, returning to us. "Radio's useless. Too much interference from the terrain. What's happening?" "Catherine went off trail," I explained tersely. "We need to follow her before she gets too far." "Split up? Are you kidding?" Rebecca looked panicked. "That's how people die in horror movies." "This isn't a movie," I snapped, my nerves fraying. "And we're not splitting up. We're going together to get Catherine, then we're hiking back to the ranger station. All of us. Now." We descended the embankment carefully, following the same path Catherine had taken. Near the water, I found where she'd turned off, a narrow but distinct trail that wasn't marked on our maps. Recent footprints in the soft mud showed it had indeed been used, and recently. "Catherine," Sarah called as we started along the path. "Catherine, answer us." The forest seemed to absorb her voice. No echo, no response. Just that same unnatural stillness I'd felt the night before. The trail wound along the creek for about 100 yards before veering deeper into the woods. The trees grew closer together here, old-growth pines that blocked much of the daylight. The air smelled different too, stagnant and vaguely metallic. We'd been walking for maybe 10 minutes when Rebecca grabbed my arm. "Listen," she whispered. We all froze. In the distance, barely audible, came the sound of rhythmic thumping, like a hammer striking wood or… "Footsteps," Melissa murmured. "Running!" Before any of us could respond, Catherine burst through the undergrowth ahead, her face streaked with dirt, eyes wild with panic. She was sprinting as if pursued by death itself. "Run!" she screamed when she saw us. "Back to camp, now!" We didn't question her. We turned and ran, slipping and stumbling on the narrow path. I caught glimpses of Catherine's terror-stricken face as we fled. Whatever she'd seen had stripped away all her bravado, all her confidence. When we finally reached the footbridge, we paused only long enough to scramble up the embankment and collapse on the main trail, gasping for breath. Catherine bent double, hands on her knees, heaving. "What happened?" Sarah demanded between breaths. "What did you see?" Catherine shook her head violently, unable or unwilling to speak. "Catherine," I said more gently, "we need to know. Was it a person? An animal?" She looked up, and I was shocked to see tears streaming down her face. Catherine never cried, not even when we lost patience at the hospital. "There's a cabin," she finally managed, "about half a mile in. Old, but being used. There were things hanging outside. I thought they were animal carcasses at first, being cured or something. But…" She broke off, swallowing hard. "But what?" Melissa pressed. "They weren't animals," Catherine whispered. "They were sleeping bags, torn open, slashed to ribbons and inside out. Dozens of them hanging like skins. And gear, backpacks, tents, clothes, all destroyed the same way, turned inside out and hanging from hooks." We stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "And there was someone there," she continued, her voice dropping even lower. "Inside the cabin, I heard a sound, like someone breathing through water. I looked through the window and saw…" She broke off again. "What did you see?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "A man. So pale he was almost gray. Tall and thin. Too thin. He was turning something inside out, working methodically. I couldn't see what it was at first. Then he turned slightly and I saw… It was a jacket, like the one in that backpack by the creek." "We need to get back to camp and get out of here," Sarah said decisively. "Now, forget the day hike. We'll pack up and head straight to the ranger station." No one argued. We practically jogged back along the trail toward our campsite, constantly looking over our shoulders. Catherine kept her hand in her pocket, where I assumed she was clutching her father's revolver. The 2-mile hike back to camp seemed to take forever. By the time we emerged into our clearing, the overcast sky had darkened further, threatening rain. But the campsite looked exactly as we'd left it, tents standing undisturbed, food bags still hanging from the tree. "Pack only what you need," Sarah instructed. "Leave the rest. We can come back with rangers." We moved quickly, each to our own tent. I yanked open my tent zipper and froze. My sleeping bag, which I'd left crumpled at the foot of my sleeping pad, was now laid out neatly, fully unzipped. Placed in the center was a small object. Daniel Lopez's driver's license from the wallet Catherine had been carrying. I backed out of the tent so quickly I tripped, landing hard on the ground. "He's been here," I gasped. "Someone's been in my tent." The others rushed over. Sarah helped me up while Melissa peered cautiously into the tent. "Check your tents," I urged. "Check everything." Catherine and Rebecca ran to their tent while Sarah and Melissa checked theirs. Within moments, Catherine's voice rang out. "Our sleeping bags too, and look." She emerged holding a small wooden figure, roughly carved into a human shape. "This was on my pillow?" Sarah and Melissa's tent had been similarly disturbed, their sleeping bags unzipped and laid flat. On each of their pillows was a small stone with a crude symbol painted on it in what looked disturbingly like dried blood. "We need to go. Now." Sarah's voice had taken on an edge I'd never heard before. Pure, primal fear. We abandoned all pretense of careful packing. We grabbed our day packs, stuffing in water bottles and whatever energy bars we could find. Catherine checked her revolver openly now, confirming it was loaded. "Stay together," she said, her earlier fear giving way to grim determination. "No matter what happens, we stay together." As we prepared to leave, a fat raindrop splattered on my cheek. Within seconds, it was pouring. A sudden, vicious deluge that reduced visibility to mere feet. "The trail will be a mess," Rebecca shouted over the downpour. "We could get lost." "We follow the creek downstream," Catherine countered. "It leads to the main park road eventually. We can't stay here." We set out, huddled together against the rain. The forest had transformed into a dripping, misty labyrinth, familiar landmarks obscured by the weather. Catherine led the way, one hand on her pocket where the gun was, the other occasionally checking her compass. The rain continued relentlessly as we slogged through increasingly muddy terrain. The creek beside us had swollen further, now a churning brown torrent that frequently overflowed its banks. Twice we had to detour around sections of trail that had been completely washed out. After what felt like hours, though my watch claimed it had only been 40 minutes, Catherine stopped abruptly. "This isn't right," she said, staring at her compass in confusion. "We should have hit the main trail junction by now." Sarah pulled out her map, trying to protect it from the rain under a fold of her jacket. "Maybe we missed it? The visibility is terrible." "No," Catherine insisted. "The junction has a big wooden sign. We couldn't have missed it." An unsettling realization began to form. "Let me see the compass," I said. Catherine handed it over. I watched the needle spin lazily, never settling on north. I pulled out my phone, which had a compass app. It showed the same erratic behavior. "The compasses aren't working," I said quietly. "That's impossible." Catherine took hers back, tapping the casing as if that would fix it. "Unless there's magnetic interference," Melissa suggested. Or, she didn't finish the thought. She didn't need to. We were all thinking the same thing, that whatever was happening transcended natural explanation. "We keep following the creek," Sarah decided after a moment. "Water flows downhill. It has to lead somewhere." We pressed on, but I could feel a growing sense of disorientation. The rain, the identical trees surrounding us, the roar of the swollen creek, it all contributed to a dreamlike state where distance and time began to lose meaning. "Look," Rebecca suddenly pointed ahead. "I think I see something." Through the curtain of rain, a dark shape was visible among the trees, something too angular to be natural. "Is it the cabin?" Melissa asked, fear evident in her voice. Catherine squinted through the downpour. "No, I think it's an old fire tower." As we drew closer, we could make out a weathered wooden structure rising above the canopy. A fire lookout tower, probably dating back to the mid-20th century. Its lower steps were rotted away, but the observation platform at the top appeared intact. "We could get our bearings from up there," Sarah suggested. "See where we are." "If we can get up," I pointed out. "The bottom stairs are gone." Catherine was already circling the structure. "There's a ladder on this side. Rusty, but looks solid enough." One by one, we climbed the metal ladder, which creaked ominously under our weight. The observation deck was small, maybe 10 feet square, enclosed by large windows on all sides, many cracked or missing entirely. Rain blew in freely, puddling on the wooden floor that felt unsettlingly soft in places. But the height did offer a better view of our surroundings. As the rain began to ease slightly, we could see the forest stretching in all directions. The creek wound like a brown snake below us. And in the distance, there, Catherine pointed southeast. "I can see the main road. It's not far, maybe a mile." Relief washed through me. We had a direction now, a concrete destination. "We should wait until the rain stops completely," Rebecca suggested. "It's a little safer up here anyway." No one disagreed. We huddled in the center of the platform, away from the more rotten-looking sections of flooring, sharing what little food we had. The rain gradually lessened to a drizzle, and fragments of late afternoon sunlight began to break through the clouds. "Once it's clear, we make straight for the road," Sarah said, outlining the plan. "We stick together no matter what. If we see or hear anything strange, we don't investigate. We run." We all nodded, too exhausted and frightened to do anything but agree. As we waited, Melissa suddenly sat up straighter. "Does anyone hear that?" We fell silent, listening. At first, I heard nothing but the dripping of water from the trees and the rushing of the creek. Then, faintly, a voice, calling, "Hello? Is anyone there? I need help." It was a man's voice, distant but clear enough to make out the words. "It's coming from that direction." Rebecca pointed toward the northwest, away from the road. "It could be Daniel Lopez," Melissa said, "the guy whose backpack we found." Catherine shook her head vehemently. "No, absolutely not. We're not investigating." "But if someone's hurt," Melissa began. "Did you forget what I saw at that cabin?" Catherine cut her off. "The inside-out sleeping bags? Daniel's jacket? Whoever's calling, it's not someone who needs our help. It's someone, or something, trying to lure us." "Catherine's right," I backed her up. "We stick to the plan, head for the road." The voice called again, closer now. "Please, I'm injured. Is someone there?" A chill ran through me. The voice was coming from directly beneath the tower now. We froze, barely breathing. Footsteps circled below, slow and deliberate. Then the sound of something on the metal ladder, a hollow, rhythmic tapping as someone or something began to climb. Catherine drew her revolver, hands shaking slightly. Sarah grabbed a broken chair leg from the floor, the only thing resembling a weapon within reach. I clutched my pocket knife, knowing how pitifully inadequate it would be. The tapping continued, growing louder. I counted each impact. How many rungs until whatever was climbing reached us? 10? 5? The ladder creaked under weight. A hand appeared at the edge of the platform, pale, elongated fingers gripping the wooden boards. Then another hand. They didn't look human. The proportions were wrong. The fingers too long, the skin too pallid. "Stay back!" Catherine shouted, aiming the revolver at the opening. "I'm armed." The hands paused. For several heartbeats, nothing moved. Then, slowly, they withdrew. The creaking and tapping resumed, but now it was descending, not climbing. We stood in frozen tableau until the sounds faded completely. Only then did we dare to breathe normally. "We need to go," Sarah whispered. "Now, while it's gone." "But what if it's waiting at the bottom?" Rebecca's voice trembled. "We'll jump," Catherine decided. "The ground is muddy from the rain. It's not that far." She was right, maybe 15 feet down. On solid ground, it would be risky. On the rain-softened forest floor, it was our best option. One by one, we lowered ourselves through the opening and dropped, landing with varying degrees of grace in the mud below. I went last, and as I hung from the edge preparing to let go, I glanced down and saw them, footprints in the mud, leading away from the tower. But they weren't human footprints. They were deeper at the front, as if whatever made them walked on its toes. And they were spaced too far apart, suggesting a stride much longer than any person's. I let go, landing awkwardly beside my friends. Without a word, I pointed to the tracks. "Don't look at them," Sarah ordered. "Just move, now." We ran, through mud that sucked at our boots, over fallen trees slick with rain, across swollen streams that now fed the main creek. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs threatened to buckle. And all the while, I felt we were being watched, that eyes followed our desperate flight from the forest's shadowy recesses. The road appeared suddenly, a gravel Forest Service road cutting through the trees like a gray scar. We stumbled onto it, gasping and laughing with relief. "Which way?" Melissa panted. Catherine checked the position of the setting sun. "That way, east, should lead back to the main park entrance." We walked now, too exhausted to run further but unwilling to stop completely. The gravel crunched reassuringly beneath our feet, a sound of civilization after the eerie quiet of the forest. As we rounded a bend, headlights appeared in the distance, a vehicle approaching. "Flag it down," Sarah instructed, already waving her arms. The vehicle, a dark green Forest Service truck, slowed as it approached. The window rolled down, revealing Ranger Frank Tanner's weathered face. "Well," he said, eyeing our muddy, bedraggled appearance, "you folks look like you've had some trouble." We tumbled into his truck, talking over each other in our rush to explain what had happened. Frank listened silently, his expression unreadable. When we finished, he nodded slowly. "You're not the first," he said quietly. "Every few years, someone reports similar experiences in that area. Most aren't lucky enough to make it out." "What is it?" I demanded. "What's out there?" Frank sighed, steering the truck carefully along the rain-slicked road. "The old-timers around Wabano call it the Hollow Man. Been stories about it since before the European settlers came. The Menominee had legends. Said it was a spirit that had forgotten what it was, that tried to become human by taking parts of people. Inside parts. That's why it turns things inside out," Catherine murmured. "The sleeping bags, the clothes." Frank nodded grimly. "Legend says it collects the essence, I guess, the shape of things, like it's learning, practicing. Each time it takes something, it gets better at mimicry." "But why didn't you warn us properly?" Sarah asked, anger breaking through her exhaustion. "You knew it was dangerous and you just mentioned some vague, unusual activity." "Would you have believed me if I told you there was a shape-stealing forest spirit killing hikers?" Frank countered. "Besides, it doesn't appear often. Goes dormant for years, decades sometimes. Last incident was 8 years ago. We thought maybe it was gone for good." "The voice we heard," I said slowly, "calling for help. Was that Daniel Lopez, most likely," Frank confirmed. "Or what it learned from him. We've had a missing persons report out for him for 3 weeks now." We fell silent, processing the horror of what he was suggesting. "The Forest Service keeps it quiet," Frank continued after a moment. "Can't exactly put up warning signs about a supernatural predator. Bad for tourism, and who'd believe it anyway? We just restrict permits, patrol more heavily when there's been an incident." "You need to close that area completely," Melissa insisted. "Cordon it off." Frank chuckled humorlessly. "Tried that in '98. Whatever's out there just expanded its territory. Started taking people from campgrounds 10 miles away. Left them. Hollowed. Better to know where it is, keep people mostly away, and hope it goes back to sleep." We reached the main ranger station as full darkness fell. Frank took our statements. The official version that would mention a suspicious person at an illegal campsite, nothing more, and arranged for a Park Service vehicle to drive us back to Milwaukee. As we waited for our ride, gathering what little remained of our courage, Frank pulled me aside. "There's something else," he said in a low voice. "Something I don't tell most people who encounter it." I tensed, not sure I wanted to hear more but unable to walk away. The Hollow Man. It marks people. The ones that get away. It remembers them. His weathered face was grave in the dim light of the station porch. And sometimes, years later, it finds them again. Finds them? My mouth went dry. "How? You said it stays in that forest." Frank shook his head slowly. "Most times, yes. But there have been cases, just a few, mind you, where survivors reported seeing it elsewhere. In reflections, at the edges of dark rooms, in dreams that don't feel quite like dreams." I thought of the scratching at my tent, the voice that had whispered my name. Had it already marked me somehow? What happens to them, the marked ones? Frank looked away. They disappear eventually, all of them. Leave behind empty clothes inside out. Or they change, start acting different, stop sleeping, pull away from family and friends. Then one day they walk into the woods and never come out. How do we stop it? There has to be a way. Legend says it can be killed, but only from the inside out. Frank looked deeply uncomfortable. That's why I gave your friend Catherine the permit, even when I had suspicions. Her father came through here 30 years ago. He was part of a group that encountered it. He shot it, emptied his revolver into it. Didn't kill it, but hurt it enough that it retreated, went dormant for years. Thought maybe she had his grit, would do the same if needed. So bullets can hurt it. Maybe, temporarily, but to destroy it completely. He trailed off, then reached into his pocket and pressed something cold and metallic into my hand. Take this. Old Menominee symbol, said to offer some protection at least. I looked down at a small copper pendant, etched with an intricate design I didn't recognize. Keep it close, Frank advised, and if you ever feel like something's watching you, like you're being hollowed out from the inside, come back here. Find me. I know people who understand these things better than I do. Our ride arrived then, ending our conversation. As we drove away from the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest, I watched the dark wall of trees recede in the rearview mirror. For just a moment, I thought I saw something pale and elongated step out onto the road, watching our departure with hollow eyes. But when I blinked, it was gone. The five of us made a pact on the drive home not to speak about what really happened. Who would believe us anyway? Better to say we got spooked by a storm, by strange noises that were probably just wildlife. The official report mentioned nothing about inside-out sleeping bags or inhuman footprints or a voice that knew my name. For a few weeks, that approach seemed to work. We returned to our hospital routines, to normal life. But normalcy is fragile when you've glimpsed what lies beyond it. It started with Rebecca. She called me one night, nearly hysterical, claiming her bathroom mirror had shown her reflection moving a half-second too slowly. The next day, she quit her job and moved to Arizona without telling anyone. Her last text to me read only, "Somewhere with no forests, no shadows. It's the only way." Then Sarah began sleeping at the hospital, claiming insomnia but unable to explain the dark circles that grew beneath her eyes like bruises. I found her one night, staring at her empty locker, murmuring about hollowness and shapes and learning. Melissa held out longer, almost 3 months. Then one morning, she didn't show up for her shift. Police found her car at a trailhead near the Wisconsin Dells, keys in the ignition, phone on the seat, clothing laid out on the ground as if someone had simply vanished from inside them. And Catherine? She bought more guns, lined her apartment windows with copper wire, tattooed strange symbols across her shoulders and down her spine. Protective wards, she claimed, from books so old their pages crumbled at a touch. She's still fighting it in her way, still believes there's a way to kill it rather than just escape it. As for me, I wear Frank's pendant. I keep my back to reflective surfaces. I stuff the crack beneath my bedroom door with salt each night. Small rituals that probably do nothing, but I perform them anyway, because I know it's coming. I feel the hollowness growing inside me, a space that wasn't there before, an emptiness waiting to be filled. Sometimes I catch myself practicing odd movements, as if my body is learning new ways to move. Sometimes I wake up with mud on my feet, though I haven't left my apartment. And sometimes, like now, as I write this, I hear scratching, gentle, rhythmic, coming from inside my closet door. My name is Emily Hall, and I am 28 years old. This happened in the northern reaches of the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest in Wisconsin, just 3 months ago. If you're reading this, it means I've already gone. Please, whatever you do, stay away from Hollow Creek Trail. Stay away from the forests at night. Stay away from mirrors when you're alone. And if you ever hear your name whispered in a voice that sounds distant, as if spoken through water or from very far away, run, because it isn't calling you. It's practicing to become you. My name is Emily Hall, and I am 32 years old. This happened in the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest in northern Wisconsin, just last October. I've been trying to make sense of it ever since, writing it down in hopes that someone might believe me, or at least understand why I wake up screaming most nights. My hiking buddy Melissa and I had been planning this trip for months. We'd both been working at the same accounting firm in Milwaukee for 3 years, and the stress was crushing us both. 80-hour work weeks during tax season, demanding clients, and a boss who thought weekends were just another opportunity to schedule meetings. We needed an escape, and the forests of northern Wisconsin in autumn promised vibrant colors and blessed silence. "You have the map?" Melissa asked as we pulled off Highway 70 near the tiny town of Florence. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, practical as always. Melissa had been my rock through the worst years of my life, especially after my divorce. She was the organized one, with 3 different backup plans for every situation. I patted my jacket pocket. "Right here. Plus, I downloaded the trail guides on my phone." I glanced at the signal. Already weak, but that was part of the appeal. 4 days of hiking the hidden trails of the Chequamegon Nicolet, 4 days away from emails and calls and spreadsheets. "Perfect," Melissa grinned, her green eyes lighting up as she shouldered her pack. "Ready to actually use those expensive hiking boots you bought last spring?" I laughed. They're about to get their money's worth. We'd chosen a relatively unknown trail system, wanting to avoid the October crowds seeking out fall colors. The Pine Song Trail wasn't on most tourist maps, but a local hiking forum had raved about its pristine wilderness and challenging terrain. The trailhead was barely marked, just a small wooden sign half hidden by overgrown brush off a Forest Service road. The early afternoon sun filtered through the canopy of gold and red maple leaves as we set off. The air was cool and sharp with the scent of pine and loamy earth. For the first time in months, I felt the knot of anxiety in my chest begin to loosen. God, smell that? I took a deep breath. No car exhaust. No perfume from Karen in accounting, Melissa laughed. No burnt coffee from the break room. We hiked for about 3 hours, moving deeper into the forest. The trail gradually became less defined, but the map showed we were on the right path toward a small clearing by a stream where we planned to make camp. The forest grew denser the further we went, the massive pines blotting out more and more sunlight until the woods around us were bathed in an eerie green-gold glow. "Is it supposed to be this overgrown?" Melissa frowned, pushing aside a tangle of branches that seemed to reach for her like bony fingers. I consulted the map again. The forum said it was minimally maintained, part of its charm apparently. If by charm they meant haven't seen a trail marker in 45 minutes, then yes, very charming. Despite her sarcasm, Melissa was smiling. Adventure was what we'd signed up for. Around 5 o'clock, we reached the clearing by the stream. It was smaller than it appeared on the map, but still perfect for our needs. A flat area for our tent, a circle of stones that indicated previous campers had used it for fires, and the pleasant sound of running water nearby. As we set up our tent, I noticed something odd about the stone circle. The rocks had been arranged in a pattern that seemed deliberate. Not just a casual ring for containing a fire, but a precise geometric shape with smaller stones placed at what looked like cardinal points. "Hey, Mel, look at this." I knelt beside the stone formation. She barely glanced up from hammering tent stakes. "Old campfire pit?" "Yeah, but doesn't it seem weird to you? Like ritualistic almost?" Melissa finally looked over. Maybe some locals use this spot, or kids messing around." She shrugged. "As long as they left us firewood, I don't care if they were summoning Bigfoot." I laughed, but couldn't shake a strange feeling about the stones. I rearranged them into a simple circle before building our fire. Just a silly superstition, but it made me feel better. As the daylight faded, we sat beside our small fire eating rehydrated pasta and sharing a flask of whiskey. The forest around us grew impossibly dark. Unlike camping near cities, here the darkness was absolute when you looked beyond our firelight. A wall of black where the trees stood sentinel. "Remember that client last month?" Melissa was saying. The one who brought in shoe boxes full of receipts the day before filing deadline? I groaned. Don't remind me. I still have nightmares about sorted them by... A sound cut through the night. A long, low moan that was neither animal nor human, somewhere in the darkness beyond our camp. We both froze. What was that? I whispered. Melissa swallowed. Probably just a deer. Or a wolf. She didn't sound convinced. Are there wolves in this part of Wisconsin? I think so. She added another log to the fire, building it higher. It's too far away to worry about. But it didn't sound far away to me. It sounded like it came from just beyond the circle of our firelight, as though something stood watching us from between the trees. I stared into the darkness, but could see nothing except my own reflection in the black mirror of the night. We stayed up another hour, keeping the conversation deliberately light, but I noticed we both kept glancing toward the woods. Neither of us mentioned the strange sound again, as though speaking of it might summon whatever made it. Finally, exhausted from the day's hike, we crawled into our tent. I fell asleep almost immediately, lulled by the whiskey and the gentle sound of the stream. I woke suddenly, completely alert, though I wasn't sure why. The tent was pitch black, and when I checked my watch, the luminous dial showed 3:17 a.m. Beside me, Melissa's breathing was deep and regular. Then I heard it, a soft rhythmic scratching against the outside of the tent, like fingernails, moving slowly around the perimeter. I lay perfectly still, barely breathing, as the sound made a complete circuit of our tent. It stopped at the entrance. The zippered flap moved slightly as though something was testing it. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain it would wake Melissa. A whisper came through the thin fabric, so quiet I could almost believe I'd imagined it. Emily. My name. Something outside our tent had whispered my name. I reached over in the darkness and grabbed Melissa's arm, shaking her awake. She made a startled sound, and immediately the scratching sound retreated. By the time Melissa was fully awake, asking me blearily what was wrong, there was nothing to hear except the normal sounds of the forest at night. I thought I heard something, I said, suddenly feeling foolish. Outside the tent. Melissa listened for a moment. Probably just a raccoon or something. Or they're curious. It said my name, Mel. Even in the darkness, I could sense her skepticism. You were dreaming, Em. We're both exhausted. Maybe, I conceded, though I knew I hadn't been dreaming. I'd been wide awake, and something had whispered my name from inches away, separated only by the thin nylon of our tent. Melissa was already drifting back to sleep. I lay awake much longer, straining to hear any sound of the visitor returning, but the night remained still. When morning came, I was groggy from lack of sleep, but determined to continue our trip as planned. We had 3 more days, and I wasn't going to let one strange night ruin everything. I didn't mention the incident again, half convinced that Melissa was right and it had been some sort of waking dream. We made breakfast, packed up, and continued deeper into the forest. According to our map, we'd reach Bear Paw Lake by mid-afternoon, supposedly one of the most picturesque spots in the region. As we hiked, I noticed Melissa glancing back at me frequently. "What?" I finally asked. "You just seem off. Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Fine, just didn't sleep great." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. Melissa had always been able to read me too well. The trail grew even more overgrown as we continued, to the point where we were often pushing through dense underbrush. Strange, considering the map showed this as a regularly used path. Several times we had to consult both the map and my phone's GPS to confirm we were still on the right track. "This can't be right," Melissa said around noon, as we stood in a small clearing trying to get our bearings. "The trail should be obvious here." I pulled out my phone, but the GPS signal was gone. "No service." "Let me see the map again." Melissa studied it with a frown. "Maybe we missed a turn." We both knew we hadn't. We'd been following the trail markers religiously, even when they seemed to lead us through the most difficult terrain. But now, looking back the way we came, I realized I couldn't see any trail markers at all. "This is weird, right?" I tried to keep my voice calm. Melissa nodded slowly. "Maybe we should head back to the last clearing, reorient ourselves." That made sense, but as we turned to go back the way we came, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The forest behind us looked completely different. The path we'd just walked through, which had been dense but passable minutes before, was now an impenetrable wall of vegetation. That's not possible," Melissa whispered. I felt the first flush of real fear. We must have gotten turned around. We didn't. We stood there, both breathing too fast, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. The forest seemed to have rearranged itself around us when we weren't looking. "Okay," Melissa said finally, her practical nature asserting itself. "We have compass. We know Bear Paw Lake is northeast of us. We just keep moving in that direction until we hit either the lake or a proper trail." It was a good plan, the only plan. We set off, using the compass to maintain our direction. The forest grew stranger the farther we went. Older, somehow, with massive pines towering above us, their trunks wider than any I'd seen before. The underbrush thinned out, but was replaced by a thick carpet of moss that seemed to swallow the sound of our footsteps. It was unnaturally quiet, with none of the birdsong or small rustlings that had accompanied us earlier. "Do you hear that?" Melissa asked. I listened. "I don't hear anything." "Exactly." She looked around uneasily. No birds, no insects, nothing. The silence was oppressive, pressing against my ears like a physical thing. Even the sound of our breathing seemed muted, as though the forest was absorbing all noise. After another hour of walking, we should have reached the lake according to our calculations. Instead, we found ourselves at the edge of a small clearing dominated by an enormous, ancient oak tree. It stood alone, incongruous among the pines, its massive, gnarled branches reaching out like arthritic fingers against the sky. What made my skin crawl were the objects hanging from those branches. Dozens of small bundles of sticks tied together with what looked like hair, dangling on thin cords. They twisted slightly in a breeze I couldn't feel. "What the hell are those?" I whispered. Melissa shook her head, eyes wide. Some kind of forest art installation? Or trail markers, maybe? Neither of us believed that. "I think we should go another way," I said, already backing up. As I stepped backward, my foot caught on something buried in the moss. I looked down and saw the corner of what appeared to be a book protruding from the ground. Kneeling, I carefully pulled it free. A small, leather-bound journal, its cover stained and weathered but still intact. "What is it?" Melissa asked, coming closer. "Some kind of diary." I opened it carefully. The pages were filled with cramped handwriting, the ink faded but legible. The dates at the top of each entry were from 1923. "October 8th, 1923 I read aloud. "Third day in the forest. The guide has disappeared. Thomas thinks he abandoned us. But I saw his face yesterday when he looked up at the trees. He was terrified. The others don't believe me, but I've heard it too, whispering in the dark. My name, over and over. It knows who I am. God help me, it knows who we all are." My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the journal. The parallels to our situation, the whispering, the disappearing trail, were too close to be coincidence. "Emily, put that down," Melissa said sharply. "We need to get out of here, now." I tucked the journal into my pack. It might contain information that could help us. "Which way?" Melissa consulted the compass again, but her face fell. It's not working." She showed me the compass needle, which was spinning wildly, never settling on a direction. A wave of dizziness washed over me. This couldn't be happening. Forests don't rearrange themselves. Compasses don't just stop working. Names don't get whispered in the night by unseen things. "We'll use the sun," I said desperately. "It's afternoon. That's west." I pointed to where the sun hung low in the sky between the trees. "If we go that way, we'll eventually hit a road or a trail." It was the only option we had. We set off, careful to give the ancient oak a wide berth, both of us trying not to look at the stick figure swaying gently from its branches. The light began to fade faster than it should have. It was only mid-afternoon according to my watch, but the forest was already darkening as though evening was approaching. The pine trees grew so close together now that we had to squeeze between them, their rough bark scraping against our clothes and skin. "We need to find a place to camp," Melissa said, her voice tight with controlled fear, "before it gets completely dark." I nodded, though the thought of spending another night in this forest made my stomach clench. We found a small space between 3 large pines that offered some protection on 3 sides. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. As we set up our tent with trembling hands, I noticed something carved into the trunk of one of the pines, a crude symbol that looked like a stick figure with too many limbs. "Mel," I said quietly, "look at this." She glanced at the carving and immediately looked away. Kids messing around, or hunters marking something. We both knew it wasn't either of those things. Unlike the previous night, we kept our conversation to a minimum as darkness fell completely. The forest around us felt watchful, as though 1,000 invisible eyes were fixed on our small camp. We didn't bother with a fire. There was no dry wood to be found, and somehow the thought of drawing attention to ourselves seemed dangerous. Inside the tent, we lay side by side in the darkness. Neither of us spoke about what was happening, as though giving voice to our fears would make them more real. "We'll get out tomorrow," Melissa said finally. "We'll find a trail or a road. This forest can't go on forever." I nodded, then realized she couldn't see me. "Yeah. Try to get some sleep. I'll stay awake for a while, then wake you for your turn." It was a relief to know one of us would be alert at all times. I closed my eyes, certain I wouldn't be able to sleep, but exhaustion pulled me under almost immediately. I dreamed of the old oak tree. In my dream, I stood before it alone, the stick figures swaying hypnotically in the darkness. As I watched, they began to unravel, the bundles of twigs separating and falling to the ground. From each bundle emerged a thin, spindly figure that moved with jerky, unnatural motions. They surrounded me, their faceless heads tilted as though in curiosity. One reached out a twig-like finger to touch my cheek. Its touch was cold and rough like bark. It leaned close to where an ear should have been and whispered, "Emily, we've been waiting for you." I woke with a strangled scream, sitting bolt upright in the tent. Beside me, Melissa stirred. "What's wrong?" she mumbled sleepily. Fear shot through me. "You were supposed to stay awake." She sat up, instantly alert. "I was. I don't remember falling asleep." A sound outside the tent froze us both. The snap of a twig, then another. Footsteps, moving slowly around our camp. Melissa fumbled for her flashlight. The beam caught something moving between the trees, a tall, thin shape that ducked out of sight too quickly to identify. "Hello," Melissa called, her voice steadier than I would have expected. "Is someone there?" No answer, but the footsteps continued, circling us. "We need to go," I whispered. "Now." We grabbed our essentials, water bottles, energy bars, compass, map, phone, and left the tent behind. Moving as quietly as possible, we slipped into the forest, heading in what we hoped was the direction of the main trail. The footsteps followed. We walked faster, then broke into a jog, branches whipping at our faces in the darkness. The rational part of my brain kept saying it must be an animal, a deer, maybe, or even a bear, but I knew with bone-deep certainty that whatever followed us was neither animal nor human. As we ran, the forest seemed to close in around us, branches reaching out like arms to block our path. Several times we had to change direction, but always the footsteps kept pace, sometimes fading only to reappear ahead of us. It was hurting us. After what felt like hours of desperate flight, we burst into a clearing and stopped short. Before us stood a small cabin, its weathered timber walls barely visible in the moonlight. A thin stream of smoke rose from the chimney. "Oh, thank God," Melissa gasped. "People." But something felt wrong. The cabin looked ancient, abandoned despite the smoke. The surrounding clearing was too perfect a circle, with the trees around it forming an unnaturally even boundary. And just visible above the door was the same strange symbol I'd seen carved into the pine near our campsite. "Mel, wait!" I grabbed her arm, but she was already moving toward the cabin, desperation overriding caution. She knocked on the door. "Hello? We need help." The door creaked open on its own. Melissa looked back at me, uncertainty plain on her face. "Should we?" The footsteps in the forest behind us were getting closer. We had no choice. We entered the cabin. Inside, a small fire burned in a stone hearth, casting flickering shadows across the single room. Simple furniture, a table, 2 chairs, a small bed, was arranged with precise care. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, as though the place had been abandoned for years despite the lit fire. On the table sat a book, the twin of the journal I'd found in the moss. Beside it was a photograph in an ancient frame. The image faded, but still discernible. 2 women, dressed in the hiking clothes of the 1920s, smiling at the camera. With a jolt, I realized they looked eerily similar to Melissa and me. One tall with dark hair, one shorter with lighter hair pulled back. Melissa's voice was barely audible. She'd seen it too. I moved closer to examine the photograph, and as I did, I noticed writing on the back of the frame. Turning it over, I read the faded inscription: "Dorothy and Elizabeth, October 1923. The forest claimed them." The names from the journal. The women who had disappeared a century ago, just as we were now lost in the same forest. A voice spoke from the darkest corner of the cabin. "You found my journal." We both whirled toward the sound. A figure stood there, impossibly tall and thin, its proportions all wrong for a human. In the dim light, it appeared to be made of twisted branches and roots, with a head that tilted at an unnatural angle. Where its face should have been was only smooth, bark-like skin with 2 deep hollows for eyes. "What do you want?" Melissa's voice shook with terror. The thing moved forward with a jerky, puppet-like motion. "To be whole again." It reached out toward me with fingers like twigs. I stumbled backward, knocking the photograph to the floor. The glass shattered, and in that instant, something in the cabin changed. The fire flared blindingly bright, then died completely, plunging us into darkness. When my eyes adjusted, the figure was gone. So was the cabin around us. We stood in the clearing, but there was no building, no fire, only the ancient oak tree with its hanging stick figures, which now seemed to watch us with malevolent attention. "It was never there," I whispered, understanding flooding through me like ice water. "None of this is real." Melissa clutched my arm, her fingers digging painfully into my skin. "What's happening, Emily?" Before I could answer, the stick figures began to move, twisting and unwinding just as they had in my dream. They dropped to the ground one by one, unfolding into spindly, inhuman shapes that surrounded us in a perfect circle. From the center of the oak's massive trunk, a seam appeared, widening into a doorway of absolute darkness. From this opening emerged a figure I recognized instantly. The thing from the cabin, but clearer now, its body a grotesque amalgamation of wood and what looked horribly like preserved human remains. "The Woodwalker," I breathed, the name coming to me from nowhere, as though placed directly into my mind. The thing inclined its head slightly, acknowledging the name. When it spoke, its voice was like rustling leaves and cracking branches. "Every 100 years, I must be renewed. 2 souls, freely given or forcibly taken." It gestured with a twisted limb toward the oak. Dorothy and Elizabeth sustain me now, but they grow weak. You will take their place." The stick figures moved closer, their twig hands reaching for us. I could see now that each one had a human face, withered and preserved like a mummy, eyes sewn shut with what looked like human hair. I thought I could make out the features of two women in their midst, the women from the photograph. Melissa and I backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The circle was closing. "Run!" I shouted, pulling Melissa toward the only gap in the ring of horrors. We sprinted into the forest, blind with terror. The trees seemed to shift and move around us, branches reaching down to grab at our clothes and hair. Behind us, I could hear the jerky, scuttling sounds of the stick figures in pursuit. My foot caught on an exposed root, and I went down hard, pain shooting through my ankle. Melissa stopped instantly, coming back for me. "Go!" I shouted. "Get help! I'm not leaving you!" She pulled me up, supporting my weight as we continued our desperate flight. We broke through a line of trees and found ourselves at the edge of a small, dark lake. Bear Paw Lake, we'd finally reached it. The water was black as ink in the moonlight, unnaturally still, reflecting the starless sky above like a mirror. "Across the water," Melissa gasped. "It might not be able to follow." We splashed into the shallows but stopped as the water around our legs began to move independently of our motion, swirling and reaching up like hands trying to pull us down. "Back!" I cried, and we retreated to the shore. The woodwalker emerged from the trees, its stick figure minions spreading out to cut off any escape. It raised its arms and the forest floor erupted around us, roots breaking through the soil, twisting upward to wrap around our ankles. "This can't be real," Melissa sobbed. "This can't be happening." But I knew it was, and suddenly I understood what the journal had been trying to tell me. I reached into my pack and pulled it out, flipping frantically through the pages until I found what I was looking for, a passage I hadn't read aloud. "The forest itself is alive," I read as the roots crept higher around our legs. "Not as we understand life, but aware. Hungry. It wants us to feed the tree, to become part of it. But there is a way out. The old legends say its power is bound to the oak. Destroy that, and the forest must release its captives." The woodwalker shrieked, an inhuman sound of rage and alarm. "The oak!" I gasped to Melissa. "We have to burn the oak." Understanding dawned in her eyes. She fumbled in her pocket and produced her lighter, the small metal one she always carried for emergencies. The roots tightened painfully around my legs as I searched frantically in my pack, finding my emergency fire starter kit, waterproof matches, and a small bottle of fuel tablets. The woodwalker was moving toward us now, its movements more urgent. "You cannot escape. The forest has chosen you." My fingers closed around the small bottle of high-proof alcohol I'd brought for treating blisters and cuts. It wasn't much, but it might be enough. "Distracted," I hissed to Melissa. She didn't hesitate. Breaking free of the loosening roots, she ran along the shore, calling out to the creature. "Hey, over here!" The woodwalker turned toward her, its minions following. I took my chance, tearing myself free of the roots and running back toward the clearing with the oak. Behind me, I heard Melissa scream, a sound of pure terror that nearly stopped my heart. But I couldn't go back. Our only chance was to reach the oak. I burst into the clearing, my ankle screaming in pain with every step. The massive oak stood as before, now empty of its hanging terrors. I uncapped the alcohol bottle with shaking hands, dousing the base of the trunk as best I could with the small amount of liquid. I broke open the fuel tablets, scattering them around the base as well. Just as I struck a match, I heard movement behind me. Turning, I saw Melissa stagger into the clearing, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead. "They're coming!" she gasped. The match flared in my hand. I touched it to the base of the oak, where the alcohol caught immediately. The flame was small, too small. It would never be enough. Then Melissa was beside me, lighter in hand. She flicked it and held the flame to her map, which caught quickly. She dropped the burning paper onto the fuel tablets. The fire grew, licking up the ancient bark of the oak. A terrible howl filled the forest, not from any one direction, but from everywhere at once, as though the trees themselves were screaming in rage and agony. The ground beneath our feet trembled. The woodwalker burst into the clearing, its body contorting in impossible ways. Behind it came the stick figures, moving faster than before, like stop-motion animations jerking through space. "It's not enough," Melissa whispered. "The fire's not spreading fast enough." She was right. The flames were already dying down, unable to catch properly on the living wood. The woodwalker raised its arms and the fire dimmed further, as though the creature was somehow smothering it with its will alone. In desperation, I reached for the journal again, searching for anything else that might help us. As I flipped through the pages, a small folded paper fell out, a page torn from another book. On it was a symbol drawn in what looked disturbingly like dried blood, and beneath it, words in Latin. I didn't speak Latin, had never studied it, but somehow I could read these words as though they were written in plain English. They spoke of binding and unbinding, of the pact between the forest and its guardian, of sacrifice freely given to break the chains of the unwilling. I understood what I had to do. "Melissa," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, "when I tell you to run, you run. Don't look back. Follow the fire." "What? What fire? Emily, what are you—" "Trust me." I stepped forward, placing myself between Melissa and the advancing horrors. The woodwalker stopped, its eyeless face fixed on me with terrible attention. "A sacrifice freely given," I said, repeating words from the paper, "to break the chains of the unwilling." The creature tilted its head, curious. "Take me," I said clearly. "Let her go, and take me in her place. One soul, freely given." "Emily." "No!" Melissa grabbed my arm, but I shook her off. The woodwalker seemed to consider my offer. Then, slowly, it nodded its misshapen head. "Give me your word," I demanded, surprised at my own boldness. "Swear it by the old oak and the deep earth." "I swear it by root and branch, by the old oak and the deep earth. One soul freely given, one soul released." I turned to Melissa, whose face was a mask of horror and disbelief. "When I do this, the forest will change. There will be a path of fire. Follow it, and don't stop until you reach the road. I'm not leaving you. You have to." I hugged her fiercely. "Someone has to tell our story." Before she could stop me, I stepped toward the woodwalker. As I did, I struck another match and touched it to the journal in my hand. The effect was immediate and shocking. The journal erupted in blue flame, burning with unnatural intensity. The woodwalker shrieked and recoiled as though in pain. I understood then. The journal was connected to the creature, a record of its victims and its power. As it burned in my hands, I felt no heat, only a strange tingling sensation spreading up my arms. The fire leapt from the journal to the ground, racing across the clearing to reignite the oak with explosive force. The entire massive tree was suddenly engulfed in blue flames that cast everything in an otherworldly light. The stick figures were burning too, their twisted bodies writhing as the fire consumed them. From within each one came a small, bright light, like a firefly but more substantial, that rose into the night sky and vanished among the stars. The souls of the forest's victims, finally released. "Run!" I screamed at Melissa as the clearing erupted into chaos. The ground split open beneath my feet. The woodwalker lunged for me, its body half consumed by the supernatural fire. As its twisted hands closed around my arms, I saw a path of blue flame cut through the forest behind Melissa, a straight, burning road leading away from the nightmare. Melissa hesitated, tears streaming down her face. "Go!" I shouted one last time as the ground gave way beneath me. The last thing I saw was Melissa turning to run along the path of fire. Then the earth swallowed me, and I was falling into darkness with the burning woodwalker still clutching my arms. I don't remember what happened next. I have flashes, fragments of memory too terrible to piece together. The oak, hollow and vast inside. Other prisoners long dead or somehow preserved in a half-life state. The woodwalker, transforming as the fire consumed it, revealing what it had once been, human, or something close to it. I remember pain beyond description as something tried to merge with me, to make me part of the forest's consciousness. I remember fighting with everything I had. And then, nothing. Darkness. Peace. I woke in a hospital bed 3 weeks later. Melissa was there, holding my hand, her face lighting up when she saw my eyes open. According to her, search and rescue had found me unconscious but unharmed at the main trailhead, with no memory of how I'd gotten there. She told the authorities a sanitized version of events, that we'd gotten lost, separated in a storm, and she'd found her way out alone. She didn't mention the woodwalker, the stick figures, or my sacrifice. Who would have believed her? But at night, when the nurses were gone, she whispered the truth to me. How she'd followed the burning path through the forest, running until she reached the road where a startled motorist had picked her up. How she'd organized a search party immediately, but they couldn't find any trace of me, or even the clearing with the oak tree. How, 5 days later, as they were about to give up, I had simply appeared at the trailhead as though I'd walked out on my own. The doctors said I was suffering from exposure and dehydration, but otherwise unharmed. A miracle, they called it. But I know better. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still feel the ancient consciousness of the forest pressing against my mind. I know that something of the woodwalker is still in me, and something of me remains in the forest. The nightmares come almost every night. Visions of the oak tree burning, souls rising like fireflies, the woodwalker's eyeless face inches from mine as we fell into darkness together. I wake screaming, certain that my skin is turning to bark, my fingers to twigs. Melissa and I never speak of what really happened, but she knows. She sees it in my eyes. She's the only one who understands why I can no longer enter any forest, why I flinch at the sight of trees moving in the wind, why I burn every twig or leaf that finds its way into my home. I've spent months researching the history of the Chequamegon-Nicolet forest, piecing together similar disappearances stretching back centuries. Different cultures, different names, but always the same pattern. The woodwalker, the oak, the sacrifices. The Ojibwe called it Wendigo, but in a different form than most legends describe. European settlers named it the Forest Keeper, or sometimes just the Old One. Every 100 years it needs new souls to sustain it. I was supposed to be one of those souls. Sometimes I wonder if part of me still is. 3 nights ago, I woke to find dirt under my fingernails and pine needles in my bed, though I hadn't left my Milwaukee apartment. When I looked in the mirror, just for a moment, I thought I saw something else looking back. Something with hollow eye sockets and skin like ancient bark. I've started recording my experiences, just as Dorothy did in her journal 100 years ago. Perhaps someone will find my record as I found hers. Perhaps it will save them. But there's something else. Something I haven't told Melissa. Since that night, I can hear the trees whispering. Not just in the forest, but everywhere. The ornamental maples lining downtown streets, the potted ficus in office lobbies. They speak to me in voices like rustling leaves, telling me secrets of root and soil and ancient, patient hunger. And sometimes, when no one else is around, I whisper back, I fear that my sacrifice wasn't rejected. It was accepted in ways I'm only beginning to understand. The woodwalker is gone, the oak destroyed, but the forest itself continues. It's patient. It can wait. I've scheduled an appointment with a psychiatrist next week. Melissa thinks it will help with the PTSD, the nightmares, the growing paranoia. I haven't told her about the whispering trees or the dirt under my nails. I haven't told her that sometimes, when I'm alone, I find myself drawing that strange symbol from the oak tree over and over, or fashioning small stick figures from twigs that find their way to me. I'm writing this down as a warning. If you're reading this and planning a hiking trip to northern Wisconsin, stay on the marked trails. Don't venture into the unnamed parts of the Chequamegon Nicolet. And if you find yourself in a perfect clearing with an ancient oak at its center, run. Run as fast and as far as you can. Because the forest is patient and it's always hungry. And because I'm starting to think that I didn't escape at all. The sacrifice was accepted. The pact was sealed. I am becoming the new woodwalker, and I am so hungry.